What's up, college football fans and Knoll Nation? Welcome to the first edition of what we're calling Plant the Spear Game Day. We're just going to have some fun with this. You can see we are on location in Dublin. I don't know, Dublin, Georgia, maybe, Michael.
Dublin, Florida.
Exactly. I don't know if this is actually Ireland or not, but we're going to pretend like it is. You know, we got the stadium in the background. We got our set up here. You know, we got the game day stage going on. You got the Kirk, over this way, Kirk the Clown sign has shown up at game day. Some FSU fans are showing out. We got a rec tech, and of course the Wazoo flag. It's not game day without the Wazoo flag. So we're all here. We're all accounted for, and excited to talk some college football with you guys today. Over the past week or so, we have put out a ton of preseason content for you guys, previewing everything that you need to know about Florida State. So make sure you go check that out. But this is going to be a little bit different. We're going to do this pretty much every week because, hey, guys, guess what? We don't like game day anymore. You know, after what they did last year and all the stuff with Kirk and everybody that they're going to have on there, the way ESPN acts towards us, we're gonna put on our own game day for Knoll Nation. So make sure you check this out on Saturdays. We'll be streaming it live on social media and it'll be on our YouTube as well. But we're gonna look at kind of Florida State, their weekly matchup, and a lot of the bigger picture talk in college football. Just gonna have some fun with this one. Really, really excited for this series, Michael, this year. But man, you know, this game in Ireland is looking like it's gonna be fun. I gotta say, like, I told myself early in the fall or in the summer last year, I was like, man, it'd be cool, but I'll be fine with not going. I am not fine without going. I am totally having FOMO right now. I'm jealous of all the pictures that have been coming out, but it looks like a really awesome time. And it looks like Florida State brought a crowd. I know they said, you know, Kirk himself did say that he talked to Michael Alford, and they are expecting over 20,000 FSU fans in Dublin. You know, they said, I think it's 3-to-1 ratio that they're expecting for Georgia Tech fans. So, you know, Florida State travels. I mean, again, you look back to last year in that New Orleans, or 2 years ago in that New Orleans matchup against LSU. We took over the city of New Orleans. We were 50-50 in the Superdome. So, man, shout out to Knoll Nation showing out. Wish we could be there with you. Well, actually, you know, you guys are outside right now. We're in the stadium. So we'll be seeing you soon. But, Michael, how are you, my friend? And are you excited for our first edition of Game Day, man? We have made it. We are on the ultimate stage.
Man, I'm so excited, Jesse, for Plant the Spear Game Day. We're bringing it to you live from places of the unknown that almost is Dublin, Orlando, and Dublin, Georgia, for sure. No, but I'm excited that, it's going to be game. We're finally going to get a game, finally going to be able to see Florida State get on the field. Everything that we've been talking about, everything we've been reading about, it's all coming together, culmination of this. And yeah, I'm just, I'm so glad that we're doing game day instead of having to watch those clowns on ESPN do game day. So yeah, I love Plant the Spear Game Day.
Right. And, you know, why would you tune in? And I know everybody's going to watch the first one. They're going to want to see what they say. I'm going to tune in because I want to see if anybody like manages to get Kirk with a tomato or something like that. Or it's Irish. It's a potato. You might better watch out because that one's going to hurt. I hope they brought some extra safety nets. But you're going to want to, you know, tune into this, man, because it's a game day that is built for those that bleed garnet and gold. You know, we're not going to spend 2 hours trashing FSU. We're going to have some fun with this too. So really excited. We got a range of topics that I know you guys are going to enjoy. But I mean, like you said, man, it is college football season. It is go time. We are just literally hours away at this point. We're under 24 hours from kicking off the 2024 season. And Florida State gets the international, not the national, but the international spotlight. Game one at noon of the entire season. All eyes are going to be on this matchup. And I think there's, you know, one, you got with what happened last year. Everybody's going to want to see, even though it is a different team.
That's right.
Everybody's going to want to see how Florida State comes out and looks this year. I think you have a chance to come out and make an opening statement. But, you know how it's going to go, Michael. If you come out and you win 42-5 or 3 or something like that, they're going to be like, oh, well, it's Georgia Tech. Who are they? You know what I mean? But if Georgia Tech wins, it'll be Florida State sucks and all that type of stuff. So, you know, they're going to twist it. They're going to move the goalpost. But I am looking forward to it, man, because we're going to learn a lot about this team in this game. I think Georgia Tech is a very formidable opponent. I think it's a game that we should win.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to learn a lot about this team, you know, in game one coming right out of the gate. I think that we do have the opportunity to have a very successful season on our plate. And I think that it starts right now because, you know, with the new 12-team format coming into this season, these ACC games have never been more important. And so you really have to try and get your season off on the right foot by winning this game because I mean, obviously you don't want to take a loss to Georgia Tech, who's only
Right.
projected to have 5.5 wins, because that puts you behind the 8 ball from a at-large perspective. But then you're also behind the 8 ball from an ACC perspective. So, man, for Florida State to have this opportunity to come out, I know this is something that they were excited about, for just Michael Alford and the university to expand their brand internationally. This is a really cool experience for a lot of people, the team, the fans, and all that stuff. But, man, college football's back, and I know it's week 0. There's not a whole lot of other games going on this weekend. Of course, there is more football to watch. We're going to talk about some of those too. But, man, that week 1 is huge. And we're going to talk about those week 1 matchups a little bit as well. We're going to save our picks for that week for next week on Plant the Spirit Game Day week 1. So make sure you check that out. But we're going to talk about those games. We got a lot of fun topics to go to. We're going to throw some hot takes at you. We're going to preview this game. But let's get into some updates with Florida State and Georgia Tech before we jump into anything else. So the first thing I think that's interesting is the line has dropped all the way to 10.5. It opened up at 13.5. I felt like maybe 10.5 is a little low. I feel like 13.5 probably pretty close, but I would have been nervous to put anything on that. I think 10.5, I will probably take something on that. I think I'm not sure why they're moving things down, but I think it is interesting to see that it has fallen a little bit. Now, when you look at another update that we have here with Georgia Tech, it was announced this week when they released their depth chart that a tight end of theirs is out for the season with a knee injury. We wish him a speedy recovery. Obviously, we don't ever want anybody to be hurt. But this is a guy that comes in as UGA transfer, was 6'5". He only had 7 receptions for 101 yards, but he had 4 touchdowns, which is the second most on the team. So Georgia Tech loses a red zone threat for the season right before a game where they're going to need all the offensive firepower that they can get. But, man, the line drops, and Georgia Tech lost a player, so that's some updates, man. Give me some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the line dropped from 13.5 to I have it currently at 10. So you have it at 10.5.
If it's 10, I'm taking that now.
Yeah, I'll take that. And I think, again, we were talking about this kind of before the show, is that, what happens is that the money comes in on Florida State. People are taking that bet. But then a lot of times what ends up happening is people want the hedge just in case for some odd reason. Let me knock on wood here. That Florida State were to lose, they wouldn't lose as much money. So they start hedging their bets and they start placing some on Georgia to either cover or to cover that line or to even outright even win themselves. And so I think that's probably why you saw the line come down a little bit. I don't think it's like a massive concern that bettors are taking that, maybe Florida State is not as good as they project to be. I mean, they're 10th in the country. They do have a quarterback that has 40 total starts, 30-10 in his starts, has over 2,600 snaps coming into play. So it is interesting that the line has come down 3.5 points or 3 points, but I don't think that should be as a sign for any Florida State fan to be worried. I do think what Georgia Tech should be worried about is the fact that they use their tight end a lot. Again, we've talked about this in our other content in our preview and prediction show that Georgia Tech their offense is very similar to Florida State. Florida State loves to use that tight end. They love to have that tight end come out of the backfield. That tight end also is in their their run scheme where they run that GY, which is G tight end, guard tight end counter play. So that's really important. So now to have to go to their second stringer, they will use 12 personnel, which is 12 personnel means 1 running back, 2 tight ends. They will use 12 personnel. So it's not like the backup tight end that's going to come in is unfamiliar with the scheme. He's just not as familiar and probably not as talented as that transfer that was going to play for them. So that is unfortunate for them. I do think that does affect a little bit about what they want to do, but I don't think it's going to affect a lot, Jesse.
No, I don't either. I think a lot of times, in the red zone, you see Haynes King call his own number and things like that. But, losing a 6'5" target that did play for you last year could be, maybe they have to settle for 1 extra field goal. Maybe every little bit helps here.
That's right.
But that, when you talk about that line, though, and we're gonna do our picks and all that stuff at the end of the game. We did that on our preview and prediction episode, but we're gonna of course have some fun with it here as well. I might take a mulligan on my score, Michael. I don't know, like if you're on social media, and of course you probably are, and you follow Florida State, and you saw the picture of Mike Norvell walking off the plane in Dublin, he packed Killer Mike. You know what I mean? He had that look, and so like I feel like I want to bump my line up. I had us originally winning by 11. I think I might have to push that number out a little bit because, whenever you see Mike come out and he's got that look on his face, that Killer Mike look on his face, the gray hoodie is back, which is a zip up hoodie this year. So The gray hoodie's back out. I thought we'd see red, garnet for like the blood that's going to be spilled
Yeah.
on the redemption tour. But yeah, man, I think the way Mike looks focused, man, I think he knows he has a big opportunity here with the week 0, with all the spotlight on Florida State at this noon kickoff. I think he knows he has an opportunity to really prove a point on ESPN and national TV, man. And I think you're going to see him try and prove a point as well. Now, of course, you got to go out and do it. Doesn't mean
Right.
you can want a lot of things. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. But I think he's going to be going out there looking for to prove a point.
Yeah, I think one of his assistants, somebody on the just the support department, whispered in his ear as they were on the plane, "Hey, Brent Key said something about your mama," because he came off that plane ready to fight somebody. I was like, man, be happy. You're in Ireland, bro.
I know. It's vacation. Enjoy it.
Vacation, enjoy it. But the theme.
It's a business trip, though.
It's a business trip. That's what they've been saying. That this is bigger than just the game. And I really think they're taking this, very seriously. They understand. Like, look, the nation. They're going to have the eyes of not just the nation, but the world watching this game. And of coming off of what they came off last year, though they've really tried to tamper down any talk about the snub and anything like that. They're focused on this team and this thing. You have to understand those players that are coming back from last year. Oh, that's somewhere in them. They're thinking about that, right? And so they're treating this trip as we're trying to accomplish business. We got things to accomplish here. If we win, we'll enjoy whatever we're going to do afterwards, but it's all about getting the win in. And so I love that Mike Norvell looked angry, because that means that he's going to be incredibly focused. It means he's going to have that team focus, and they're not just going to be in all of their surrounding. They're really there to try to get that dub and get out of there.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, when you see that look, like I remember he had that look at Miami when they won 45-3. And so he was meaning business. So let's get into some national topics real quick. Let's talk about something. I think 247 had maybe been watching our recent shows. They've heard me complain a little bit about not having the 247 talent composite rankings out for 2024 yet. And lo and behold, they dropped, I think yesterday it was. So we're going to go through and kind of look at some of these things, man. And I think first off, on again, keeping in mind, we're going to talk about this Florida State centric, but from a national perspective, I think Alabama could be a problem again this year, man. I mean, when you look at Kalen DeBoer, we were talking about it before the show, 104-12 as a head coach. Alabama comes in with the number 1 most talented roster in the country. And I remember looking back last year, and I could be a little bit mistaken about this exact number, but I know it's pretty close within a few numbers here. Looking at what he did, he took Washington to the national championship last year.
Yes, he did.
And Alabama had 47 more blue chips than he did at Washington last year. So, man, you give a guy with that much prestige as a coach, that much talent on a roster to work with. And I mean, they could be a problem again. We'll see. I know there's a lot of belief that maybe it's not going to look that way. But again, like we were talking about before the show, he's won everywhere he's been. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see Alabama. Obviously, they're going to be one of the favorites to win the title this year. And then you have Georgia at number 2. So no surprise there as well. 2 of the top teams in the country, just, raking in the talent. And that's the thing when you talk about Florida State. Like, I firmly believe Florida State can make it to the playoffs. I firmly believe if you put them in the playoffs, you just never know, man. I mean, we'll have to wait and see what this team looks like. You would have had to play those teams last year with an even on paper, of course, remember, on paper, a less talented team than you have this year. Right. And I think with Jordan Travis, you could have went in and won a national championship. So I'm not going to say what you can and can't do, but I think it is important to remember those teams are out there waiting for you,
right?
When you get to the playoffs. And of course, you have Ohio State at 3, Texas at 4, and Clemson still, man. That is, again, we've talked about this over and over. Yes, while things have been kind of slipping from a success on the field perspective, they are still very, very talented. So, man, the top 5, I think 4 out of the 5, I'm not going to group Clemson in there with them. I think they're kind of a peg down from everybody else. But, man, that top 5 looks like they are pretty loaded. Florida State does come in at 13th, though. This is the highest that they've had in the last 2 years since Mike Norvell, I believe, has been at Florida State. We talked about this in another episode where Mike Norvell is 8-2 against teams that are more talented than him. He's 23-4 in the past 2 seasons. And that was with a team talent ranking that had never cracked the top 15, a blue chip ratio that had never cracked 50%. And so now you have a 53% blue chip ratio and you're 13th in talent. So like he's got again, this is what we've been talking about. You may not have your top producers that are household names yet. They could get there, but this is the most talented team he's had. And I'll kick it back to you on this, but I do find it funny when you see the numbers actually come out. Oh, Mr. Can't recruit Mike Norvell is one spot ahead of Can't Take a Knee Mario. So, but yeah, man. So, just to give everybody a look that hasn't seen, Alabama's 1, Georgia's 2, Ohio State is 3, Texas is 4, Clemson is 5, Oregon is at 6, Texas A&M is at 7. Shout out Jimbo, couldn't win with that roster. Oklahoma at 8. LSU is at 9th. Notre Dame, who is on your schedule. Again, there's 2 teams already that are on your schedule. Comes in at number 10. Penn State at 11. Florida, number 12. Still a lot of talent on that roster. It's just, you kind of wonder, there's no excuse when you got that much talent looking at some of the other teams. Florida State at 13. Miami at 14. USC at 15. Michigan at 16. And that round, and then Tennessee 17, Auburn 18, Mizzou 19, and Ole Miss 20. So that's your top 20 and most talented. So give me some thoughts on what we're seeing here, man.
Yeah, well, okay. Remind me, what was his Connor Scallions? I'm surprised that Michigan is even in the top 20 after he left, because he was basically their talent.
That was a consensus 5-star right there.
I mean, he was basically winning games for him. No, for sure. I think it's a testament to Mike Norvell and that staff and how they've been recruiting to kind of get them into, like you said, they weren't even cracking the top 15, top 20 in talent, the composite talent scores. For them to be 13th and to have a 53% blue chip ratio goes to show that this coaching staff has been, the climb is real. Every year they've gotten better and better as far as attracting talent, keeping talent, developing talent, and then having you play on the field. And to be 8-2 against teams that are more talented than you shows that Mike Norvell had. That's called coaching right there, Jesse.
Yep.
And so can you imagine this year? You would have to think that, okay, well, last year, we all thought last year's team was really talented. And you're saying that this year's team is more talented than last year's team. And so what can Mike Norvell do with that? What can the coaching staff produce on the field with a team that is actually more talented collectively than the talent we had last year? Now, last year we had incredible talent at the skill position. And obviously we had Jordan Travis, we had Trey Benson, we had all the works, but we didn't have as talented of an offensive line that took a step back last year. Well, this year it's supposed to be the bell cow of that offense is the offensive line. So it's exciting to see the talent get better, but then also to see the results of that talent on the field.
Yeah, and that's what I'm so interested in. When you think back to 2022, they went 10-3, but that was a really, really young team. A lot of those guys, no matter what their year was next to their name, they didn't have a lot of snap experience. They didn't have a lot of game experience. So you had a really young team in 2022. And then in 2023, I believe they may have almost even taken a step back in the talent. I think they were 20th last year. And so again, man, you just look at, you have a team where we talked about this before, man. 21 out of 22 starters on that depth chart are upperclassmen. So you have the experience. A lot of these guys have played a lot of football, and it's the most talented roster yet. There's a lot of unknowns, which is something you didn't have in 2023. You kind of knew what everybody was going to be. But at the same time, I think this year, if you hit on these guys, if they turn out to be what you think they can be, and Mike Norvell does what we've seen him do in the past, I think that's why, you see a lot of people outside of Florida State that think it's going to be a step back year. I've seen some 9-3, some 8-4s, some no playoffs, no ACC championship type of stuff. And I understand their argument for that. But I think you have to look at, we've talked about the hit rate in the portal. We've talked about him being able to take guys like Trey Benson and Johnny Wilson and even Jordan Travis and come in where guys that weren't major producers at their position and turn them into NFL draft picks. And if they're able to repeat that process this year, and frankly, they haven't given us a reason to believe that they can't. And so if you get that Malik Benson, if you get that type of year out of a DJU and a Jaylen Brown, and you're able to stack that like you have the past 2 years, again, man, the cupboard is more full than it has been in the past. And so I think as long as they can maximize their talent, they'll be in a really good spot. Just again, keep in mind, you do have a lot of really talented teams waiting for you in the playoffs.
That's right.
But I think Florida State has the horses to get there. Now, some other interesting notes when I'm running through these rankings is SMU is at 25. They are, I believe, the fourth most or fifth top 5 in the ACC. So, we said that game was going to be a little bit harder than you think. They are top 25 in talent rankings. You have Louisville down at 36. So some of the ACC teams starting to fall in NC State at 40th, a team that a lot of people are predicting to make the ACC championship. Of course, a lot of that has to do with the schedule. Georgia Tech comes in at 46. So again, man, this is one of those where you feel like Georgia Tech has that good offense. They have that continuity, bringing back a majority of their offense that was really good last year. But again, from just a talent perspective, you should be able to win this game. I mean, they have 14 blue chip players and 0 5-stars, and then you go and you look at Florida State and they have 44 blue chip players and 3
Yeah.
5-stars. So again, the talent rankings are there. I think
Right.
you should be able to do something with that. Now, when you look at just the ACC, just to look at this real quick, Clemson is number 1, Florida State is number 2, Miami is number 3, UNC is number 4, and SMU is number 5. So you do have some of the top teams in there on your schedule. Now, what I do find interesting too is Virginia Tech. There's a lot of people that think Virginia Tech's going to go like 10-2, make the ACC championship, and get a playoff run. They are the 13th most talented team in the ACC.
Wow.
Only 12 blue chips on that roster. So that's pretty interesting for all the lofty expectations that they have. That's a lot of banking on returning production.
That's right.
And, again, that's something that we've talked about in the past. So, like, returning production is great if it's good production.
That's
That
right.
doesn't mean you're going to go out and win more games. So, just, man, again, it's really interesting to see these numbers finally come out. But it's interesting to note that Florida State is finally in that top 15 roster. I feel like when you see what Mike Norvell has done without a top 15 roster, without being over 50%, man, just imagine.
Yeah.
Because I think the other thing to think about this too with our roster is a lot of the blue chip players are the younger players.
That's
coming
right.
out of camp and practice, we've heard a lot about how most of the talented players are those young guys. They're just freaks that
Right.
they're buried on the depth chart right now, but they're probably going to see playing time. And so, man, you just imagine when Mike Norvell has a top 10 roster with like a 60% blue chip ratio, given the history he's had of winning without that, man, I'm excited for now, but I'm also excited about the future when you look at this roster and the way they're building it.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at long term, you feel like Florida State, as long as they keep Mike Norvell, is in good hands, right? It's in good hands because you see the talent that's coming behind the current players. Every year, they're getting more and more talented players on that team, and so the legacy, the long term effect of that will be hopefully good for Florida State. But even right now, I mean, just as you said, I mean, Florida State's going to play 5 of the top 25 in the composite rankings this year. 5 of them, Clemson. Clemson, Notre Dame, Florida, Miami, and SMU. And depending on
UNC.
where UNC, so 6. And then they're going to play 7 of the top 50, with Georgia being 40th something. So this is going to be a schedule that's going to challenge Florida State this year, for sure. But again, Florida State does have, outside of Clemson, the more talented team that can compete and win all of these games, and including against Clemson, because even though Clemson might have the more talented team, I don't think they have the momentum, nor do they have the complete talent at every position that they need. That's gonna, we talk about that game later on in our preview thing, but I think that game's going to be a hard game. But I think Florida State's going to pull it out there.
Yeah.
So I think it's just when you look at this team, I mean, you are excited for this season because you think it has talent all over. The issue is that talent just doesn't have any production to go with it just yet.
Right.
And so as it begins to produce, you'll be able to see more and more of it. And Mike Norvell, again, we've talked about this before, the boom and bust rate. Mike Norvell has a greater boom rate than he does a bust rate with development, especially out of the transfer portal.
Yeah, and I want to touch on 2 things real quick. First off, I want to touch on, because you make a good point. We talk about that schedule and how it's a lot harder than people think this year.
Yeah.
Phil Steele has us at 12th in the country in strength of schedule ranking, and he uses a lot of different metrics to rank that, home, away, and returning production, all that stuff. So that schedule is tougher than people think. You got to play a good bit of talented teams this year. But again, I think Mike Norvell is the X factor for Florida State. Like we talked about, 23-4 over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And the 2 losses, 8-2 against teams that are better or have a more talented team than him. One was to Georgia when half your team didn't even play.
That's right.
The other was to a Clemson team when you were young. Not only that was a 2022 loss. Like, not only were you a lot more inexperienced than, but you didn't have the talent that they did either. He's only lost 2 games in the last 2 years to teams that had a less talented roster. And that was NC State and Wake Forest, who had significantly more experience than they did. So you think Mike Norvell is going to be able to get the best out of his roster. So I mean, I definitely think it's going to be a tough schedule, but, again, man, I think that you'll be able to manage that as well, with Mike Norvell, if they get the best out of these guys, which we're
That's
going to
right.
find out soon. And that's what I can't wait for. But, man, it's just, it's nice to see them getting that better roster. And a lot of that comes with development. And that's the other thing that I want to touch on, because I still get these daggone comments all the time about, well, that roster's got a lot of transfers on it. That means they can't develop anybody. And I'm like, man, first off, name a school that this must be Dabo's burner that keeps commenting on making all these comments. He's just mad that Mike's doing well with the portal. But like
Exactly.
outside of Dabo's burner commenting on everything, name a team that hasn't used the portal. They're talking about how you can't develop. And I'm like, so you're telling me that Georgia took Trevor Etienne because they can't develop running backs? Alabama took Jahmyr Gibbs because they can't develop running backs. Kalen DeBoer took needed a transfer quarterback to get him to the national championship. Alabama would go out and hire a coach that can't develop. That's such a lost and just ridiculous narrative nowadays. I actually think it's the opposite. You've seen people who have taken Norvell's game plan, but also, like we talked about before, you look at Jordan Travis, you look at Johnny Wilson, you look at Trey Benson. These guys did not come in as top producers. They were developed by them.
Yep.
Just because you come in as a transfer doesn't mean that you were a fully developed player. I mean, even you look at Jaylen Brown. Yes, he spent a year at LSU, so we like the college strength and development and conditioning and all that stuff. But he hasn't recorded a stat on the field yet. So if he comes out and has a good year in this year and next year and going forward, Mike Norvell and them get credit for that. I don't understand this misnomer. And frankly, it doesn't matter, because I think I always tie this back to, look, a coach's job, of course, is to develop his talent, but his main job is to put the best team put the best team he can on the field every year. And if that means taking transfers, then, whatever system works, I'm fine with it.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Jermaine Johnson couldn't get enough playing time at Georgia to save his life, right? Jared Verse was this D whatever it was at New Albany, who he had some stats and stuff, but he was an unknown commodity. Braden Fisk was an unknown commodity, right? And they come to Florida State, and they already had skill and talent, but Mike Norvell and that defensive staff and the offensive staff put these players in the position to succeed. They coach them in such a way that they bring out the best of them. Remember, Johnny Wilson was an afterthought at Arizona State. Trey Benson had broken every bone in his leg, both legs. I don't know how many times. He was at Mario Cristobal, basically abandoned the dude, right?
Yeah.
And then yet they come to Florida State, and now they're being drafted pretty high. They're being drafted and making significant. I mean, you heard everything. Keon Coleman's killing it in the offseason with the Buffalo Bills. Trey Benson's been reports have been great with him. Fisk and Verse I've been hearing, because I'm a Rams fan, been hearing so much about them. Again, it goes to show that Mike Norvell and this staff, they not only get those players, they develop those players. And Kalen DeBoer had to go to Indiana to recruit a quarterback so that he could get to the national title game. Michigan had transfers as well. Georgia has just taken ETN. Why would they need to take ETN? Because everyone's starting to understand that it's no longer just high school recruiting. You need talent that is developed and ready to play now. Mike Norvell has gone and got talented players that didn't have stats, that didn't have production, and then developed them. So if anybody's winning the game, it's Mike Norvell. And then last thing, I'll throw this back to you, is that you look at Ole Miss, you don't hear people complaining about what Ole Miss is doing. They have literally gone portal. They recruit more in the portal than they do in high school.
Yeah.
Mike Norvell's trying to balance that. And so again, this is the era of college football. So for people who make that excuse that, it's just portal, it's lazy. It's absolutely lazy.
Right. And I think when you look at it too, it's like in the win now, what have you done for me lately society, you have to win now. And so that's why you see guys like Lane Kiffin, look, we got to go to the portal and get help right now.
Right.
And so I think it's a good system. And it's funny because most of the ones that say that are Miami fans.
Yep.
And it turns out I think Miami had more transfers than Florida State did. So it's like, okay, cool take, but kind of wrong.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some other games, man. Now, week 0, there's not a whole lot going on in week 0. I saw an article the other day on social media where they were talking about, should they just move the season up, and get to the point where you just have them play week 0 and actually have more meaningful games, because it's like you get the one game and then you kind of have a couple other sleepers or blowout situations or things like that. And I would like to see them just kind of move it up a little bit, maybe go ahead and just incorporate week 0 so we could have those better games. But I do think it's funny because, if you ask people of teams in the South, if you want to move that game up to say like summertime in the South, we're probably going to say no for that. But
Exactly.
yeah, but there is another one that I think is going to be interesting to watch for our fans anyway, and that's the SMU Nevada game in week
That's right.
0. There's not a whole lot going on there, but as a 25.5 point favorite, they should, kind of wipe the floor with Nevada. But again, man, that is a opponent of yours coming up the season. So at least they'll be against a Division I team, even if it's not a great one. But you'll get a chance to kind of see what they look like. They play at 8:00 on Saturday night. So that will be one to keep your eye on, just to get a look at that SMU team and see how they do. We expect them to be pretty good this year. We'll see if they cover. The line is actually up to 26 now. Of course, you have Montana State and New Mexico. I know that was an interesting one that you had as well. You think that what New Mexico might cover on that, as Montana State, an FCS program, is a 13-point favorite over an FBS program. So that's going to be interesting, which also makes you, and we'll get into this in week 1, makes you interested in that week 1 matchup with Colorado and what North Dakota State's going to do. I think Dion and the guys are going to be on upset alert there.
Yes.
North Dakota State is no joke. And then there's also the interesting one. I'm going to let you share the story on this because it's super interesting. I have to say the joke, Michael. I have to say this joke. So, Delaware State is taking on Hawaii, and this is a 40.5 point favorite by Hawaii. I don't know that Hawaii's ever been a 40.5 point favorite since the was it Colt Brennan or whatever, I think.
Yeah,
was the guy
Colt
back
Brennan.
In the days, the Colt Brennan days. But like there was something, and I'm gonna let you share the details on it. But Delaware State like missed some flights, and the first thing I said was, "Is Willie Taggart coaching Delaware State?" Because that's some Willie Taggart stuff. But tell us the news about this, man. What happened? This sounds like a really weird situation.
Yeah, it is weird. So basically, if the rules are if you play Hawaii because of the travel, you actually get an extra bye week. So it's you basically play them on week 0. And so Delaware State, this is a buy-in game for Delaware State. They're going to get paid a lot of money to come get their butts whooped, basically. Okay. Well, Delaware State is actually close to Pittsburgh. Okay. And so, but yet they took their flight, Jesse, out of JFK. If you don't know what that is John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. It's one of the biggest airports in the country. And so they, instead of flying closer to Pittsburgh, where they're close to, they went and drove all the way up to JFK to get their flights. But Jesse, they missed their flights because the busing company that was supposed to take them was delayed in picking them up. So they're basically not. They literally had to split the team up so that they could get to Hawaii late. They're basically going to be like getting off the bus in their uniforms. And so the line, I think it was somewhere around like 25 or 30 or something like that, and it jumped up to 40 just because of that own situation. Literally, they're going to, like I was telling you before the show, like Hawaii should just try to run the score up to like 40 and then be done by the first quarter. They can just put all their backups in, because Delaware is just not, I mean, that the jet lag, all like that stuff, it's just going to be a thing for them.
That's a crazy situation. And like you said, it wasn't necessarily the coach. It was the busing company that took responsibility for it. And I believe the company name was Willie Taggart Tour Lines or something like that. So, I'm sorry, Willie. I'll leave you alone. But one other one that is not, I guess you could call it week 0. Maybe it's early week 1 on Thursday. That might be interesting for us to keep our eye on too. That will happen before our next game day show is North Carolina at Minnesota. Now, Minnesota is a 2.5-point favorite. Will be interesting to see what North Carolina does there, because, again, you get them at Doak this year. So we'll be interested in watching that. But without getting too far into it, because we are going to make picks and talk a little bit more about these games in depth, let's preview that massive week 1. This is something that I love. Like week 0, you usually get about 1 or 2 good games. But then week 1, man, they have been having some home runs as far as matchups go. And first on the list is Georgia and Clemson. Now, this one is, I think it's at 11 o'clock or noon or something crazy like that. It's a noon game. I'm pretty surprised that it's that early. Probably might work out in Clemson's favor. I think you want like every advantage you can get. Georgia is really good in Atlanta against everybody not named Nick Saban.
That's right.
So, you know what I mean? So, like, if I'm Dabo, he was an Alabama guy. He's like friends with Nick Saban. I know Kirby was too. if I'm Dabo, I'm like, Nick, name a price to stand on our sideline. I
Just
just need a
stand
good
on our
lunchtime.
sideline. That's all
Just
you
be here. So that's going to be an interesting one. We know that they did meet in 2021 in Charlotte, and UGA won 10-3. And, that was a down year for Clemson. That was the year Georgia won a national championship. DJU had that kind of really bad season at Clemson, and they still held 10-3. So this one, you could maybe see where this one's a little bit closer. Looking at the all-time record, Georgia does have a massive advantage, 43-18 all-time against Clemson. And UGA currently is a 14-point favorite. Now,
14 points, man.
I think that had come down a little bit. I thought it might have been.
I still got it at 14.
I thought it might have been higher than that in the past. But
okay.
Yeah. I thought it started out higher than that, but I could be wrong there. But yeah, man, 14-point favorite. I think this one again this is going to be a bit of a defensive battle here. Clemson has been relying on that defense. I think we're a lot of us are looking to see what Cade Klubnik, if he can have that rebound year. It wasn't terrible last year, but there was just so many mistakes and miscues for that offense. Can he rebound this year? And he's going to have to do it against one of the best teams, the preseason national championship favorite, in basically home field advantage. Now, Clemson's really close to Atlanta too. It's not like it's not like they're playing USC or something like that from out west. It's pretty close, but man, while part of me feels like in a defensive struggle, Clemson can keep it close. I don't know that I'm thinking it's even going to be 14 points close. I think it's going to be a little bit. I think there's going to be a 2 in there, when we get all said and done.
I appreciate you, Jesse, trying to be nice for Clemson, because, we are kind of, the friend of my friend is the friend of my enemy is my friend, with the whole ACC thing. I really do appreciate that for you, but I can't do it. Listen, Georgia in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, that is Georgia's backyard. Yes, Clemson is close. That place is going to be red and black, and you're going to see like a speckle of orange in there, right? It's a 14-point favorite for Georgia. They have quarterback Kaysen Beck back. They have Travis Etienne at the running back. They have that line that's back again. That defense, while they weren't that, what was that, 21? They weren't that 21 defense that Georgia had. They're still going to be pretty elite. And right now, I don't trust Cade Klubnik to play to the level that will get you a win, or even I'm going to say this, keep it close. I think I'm not saying it's going to be like a 40-point blowout. I think Georgia will cover in this game. And I just don't see right now Clemson being able to hang with Georgia.
Yeah, I can see that. Now, my only thing with Georgia, they had some pretty close games last year.
They did.
Where the Auburn game and things like that. South Carolina, even where they were trailing at halftime. They weren't as dominant as they were in the past last year, except for one game. Well, we won't talk about that. But I do think Clemson, I think I think Georgia will cover that game. Like you said, I think they will cover. I just see the ability for Clemson, if they keep the ball on the ground, if they play good defense, maybe they keep it close. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's going to be a step on the wrong foot to start the season for Dabo and them. We'll see how that one plays out. But again, we'll get into it more next week. The next one I think that's going to be interesting in that week 1 slate is Penn State at West Virginia.
Oof.
Penn State, man, they are a team that, again, is high up there in those talent rankings. They're always kind of favored to try and make it to the playoffs. They're always, kind of a perennial 10-2 team. And West Virginia, while not great, it's a good test for them. It's a rivalry game, so you want to see it come out. But I will say Penn State did win 38-15 last year. They were at home. They do have to go to West Virginia this year. 49-9 all time against West Virginia. So they have really put it on the Mountaineers throughout their history. Penn State is only an 8.5-point favorite. So this one I think would be really interesting because Penn State has that. They're playing in a tough Big Ten this year. You got Ohio State, you got Oregon, you even got, say a Michigan or something that's still, I don't get the Michigan hype. I really don't. They lost so much. But you have, I think they're one of the top 3 when you look at Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State. But if you come out and get upset by West Virginia, I mean, that's going to be huge for West Virginia because I know you got the automatic qualifier this year, but I don't know that you have a clear outside of maybe Oregon or Oklahoma State. I don't think you have like a clear dominant team in the Big 12 this year.
Correct.
With Texas and Oklahoma being in the SEC. So it would be a massive statement by West Virginia, but man, I'm still going to lean Penn State on this one.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Is West Virginia ranked in this game, Jesse?
I don't believe so.
Then Penn State's going to win. I would only be worried about this game if I was Penn State if they're ranked, because we know how Penn State does in ranked matchups.
Yeah,
Not very
yeah,
good, right?
yeah,
So since West Virginia is unranked, now the over under of this game, I believe, is at 51.5 points. So if you're
yeah,
a betting person out there, I would take the under. I would
yeah.
take
I
the
think so
under
too.
because
Yeah,
Penn State doesn't score as well on the road as they do at home. And this is West Virginia. And while West Virginia may not be, while the Fighting Neil Browns, who is the former awesome offensive coordinator at Kentucky, while they may not be as talented as Penn State, they will play rugged defense better at home. So I would
yeah,
take the under on this game if you're a betting person.
yeah. Pat White, Steve Slayton, they're not coming out of that
They
locker
ain't
room.
coming out of that locker room.
They're not
Mitch
coming out of that locker room.
Rodriguez. Yeah,
Man, that
exactly.
used to be so much fun. Like that used to be my team on NCAA back in the day because it was
Yes.
so fun to play
Noel
with those guys.
Devine.
Oh
Yeah.
man, they had some playmakers there. Now the next one that I think is interesting, man, is you have Notre Dame against the ex-Fighting
Mm.
Jimbos in Texas A&M. And we talked about it with that talent ranking. Jimbo left a fully stocked
Yeah.
cabinet, for the new head coach coming in there, Mike Elko, as a 7th ranked team in the country in talent. Now, Notre Dame, again, we said they were top 10 too. So
Yeah.
in talent ranking. So this is going to be a heavyweight bout between these two
Yeah.
teams. Now, I think when you look at Notre Dame has a good transfer quarterback in Riley Leonard. You have continuity in that system. It's been a few years. But this is interesting, man, because again, you have to go out there to the Colt out there in
My
West Texas,
gosh.
and you have to you beat the dudes in overalls and all that type of stuff that they're doing, the midnight yells and all that type of stuff. But it's 100,000 seat stadium
Oof.
plus. It's going to be loud. It's going to be rocking. They finally got over the Jimbo days, so I think there's going to be some excitement about Elko
Yeah.
coming in. A&M is a 3-point favorite, which is basically giving them the home lean. The last
Yeah.
time they met was 2001. A&M won 24-3. But, that Notre Dame, I think for us, I mean, I'm not one of them. Like, we don't do the SEC chant. We don't necessarily cheer for the
Nah.
ACC teams. I don't care that Clemson beats Georgia. I think it
Nope.
would probably be good for your strength of schedule if they did, but I don't
But
need them to do that. I think you do want Notre Dame to win this game because I think, you're going to want that matchup at the end of the year to be as big as possible.
yeah.
But again, man, this is two really, really talented teams. One's in a first-year coach, but maybe you level that out a little bit by giving
Yeah.
them the home field advantage. Man, this was going to be tough to pick. We're going to find out if Notre Dame can win the games that they should, because this
Yeah.
is a game that they should win. I'm going to take the Fighting Irish in this one, but I think it's going to be close.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, Marcus Freeman, obviously we saw last year, they were within a hair shot a couple of times of having a couple big games, especially against Ohio State. With Riley Leonard transferring there, the question is he a better passer than he was, last season? Obviously, his legs were the thing that really helped Duke a lot, but then, his passing left a lot to be desired. So
Yep.
you wondering if he's gotten better at that. I don't know who their offensive coaching staff is, so I don't know much about them. But you saw that they had Sam Hartman last year, but Sam Hartman had already had all that experience at Wake Forest.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's going to be a big thing. Can Riley Leonard hold up in what is going to be a fringe of weirdness, as I call it, Cal Stadium, is the fringe of weirdness, because them boys in overalls and their weird yells and their weird cultish-like behavior is weird. Now, the great thing about this, Jesse, is we don't have to hate them anymore because, Jimbo's gone. And how lucky is it to be Mike Elko and basically inherited? Now, a lot of those guys transferred out, but still, this roster, as you just saw in the composite ranking, is ranked pretty high. And so he basically inherited a top 25 team. I mean, they're ranked 20th, and they're playing the number 7 team in the country. So, I think the fringe of weirdness is actually going to be an advantage for Elko, and I think I might be taking Texas A&M, but you'll have to tune in next week to see.
Yeah, and I will say what's interesting about this game too is you have Elko, who was the DC at Texas A&M, so you wonder how much the scheme even changed from the 2 years that he left. So they may be able to get up to speed a little bit faster. He also had success in year 1 at Duke. That was one of their good years. So it will be interesting to see how quickly he can get them up to speed. But what I'm really interested in this game, I'm interested to see how Riley Leonard does against that Texas A&M defense, because I think Florida State will have Elko's a great defensive coach.
Right,
I can't take that away from
absolutely.
him. I think we're going to have a similar level of defense, if not better. And so if you see Riley Leonard come out and kind of light him up, We might be a little nervous
He
about
might be
that
a
one.
little nervous.
But if they shut him down, or he's only like limited to that one-dimensional guy like we've seen in the past, then I think you feel a lot better about that Notre Dame game. So that one will be one to keep an eye on too, because again, that's one of the biggest games on your schedule. Now, another big Week 1 matchup is USC versus LSU. And so this one is going to be interesting, man. You could see where this could be some kind of shootout. Neither one of these teams really play a whole lot of defense. I have heard that USC should be better on defense this year. It's out in Las Vegas. Man, it's going to be interesting. They've only ever played 2 times in the past. They're 1-1, last met in 1984. LSU, as we know, is going to have to be replacing their Heisman winner, Jaden Daniels. You got a couple other pieces that you're going to have to replace there, either with their prolific wide receiver, but Nussmeier was a legit passer. I mean, he was a guy that torched Georgia secondary that year in the SEC championship. I was actually a little bit more worried about him taking the starting reins if Jaden Daniels tested the NFL before. But you also have to replace Caleb Williams on the other side, and that's a big difference there. I forget they got the guy that played in the bowl. I can't even think of his name.
Miller
Moss. Yeah. So Miller Moss era begins out in LA.
Eminem.
I mean, you look at the passing attack that LSU has, and they might smoke that secondary worse than Lincoln Riley smokes a brisket. So,
yes,
we'll see. We'll see. But I will say that, like, again, USC is supposed to have a better defense. We'll see it when we believe it. It might be faker than Brian Kelly's Southern accent. So.
Keep it going.
But LSU is a 4.5-point favorite. So give me some thoughts on this one, man. I know, like, you used to be with USC and obviously out there in California. So I know this is going to be one you're going to be keeping your eye on.
Oh, yeah. I definitely keep my eye on this, like, because I live there. Listen, I've always been a Noel fan, bleed garnet and gold for the whole of my life. But as I was out in California, it was really cool to be able to had former students go to USC. And so it's cool to be a part of that. Listen, I mean, it's the same question we're asking with Georgia Tech. How can you go from the worst defense in the world and improve in 1 year? Like, I think you might go from like 118 to maybe 70th or, 101 to maybe 60th, but you're not going from, in the hundreds to like the teens, that just literally impossible, even with the transfer portal. And so in the same way that I think Georgia Tech is going to make a jump in their defensive production, I don't think it's going to be so significant that you should be absolutely worried about it. In the same way, I think LSU, which had a terrible defense last year, and USC, who had even a terrible defense last year, they're going to make improvements, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere significant in that. And then the other thing, Jesse, I'd say this. You think Brian Kelly woke up one day in the summer, checked the 2024 schedule, and literally sigh a huge relief that he didn't see FSU on that schedule?
100%. Like, that automatic L is gone off the schedule now.
He said, "Thank you, Jesus." He said, "I can sit home and eat my grits with my family and beat USC." Yeah, I think that's going to be a great game. If I was picking right now, which I'm not, but if I was picking right now, I'd probably take the fighting Brian Kelly's, but we'll see next week how that plays out.
Yeah, I would probably lean them initially. I mean, again, like you said, you got to replace the Heisman winner. You got to replace a guy like Malik Neighbors, but that was the number 1 scoring offense in college football last year. So they're doing some things. And USC really couldn't even win with Caleb Williams there at quarterback. So that one will be interesting. Now to the one that we are, of course, all going to keep our eyes on here. The one that we're all hoping that like a meteor hits or something like that. I hope everybody's safe. I just hope both teams lose somehow. Like, whatever. Maybe the buses are delayed in traffic. They just can't play the game and they got to count it as a loss. And that is Miami at Florida. This is interesting, man. And what's interesting about this game, when I was taking a few notes on this, Florida won 24-20 in 2019, but that's the last time they've played. And Miami is 29-17 all time against Florida. They do hold a slight edge in the all-time record, 7-3 in the last 10, but they've only played 3 times in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
I think we need to fix that. I think
it's not fair.
Right. Well, and I would like to see like that true state championship type of deal there. I would really like to see them have to play, maybe not every year, but at least, once every other year, every third year, something like that. I would like to see that work out somehow. Conference realignment is probably going to screw all that up. But this one's going to be interesting, man. I think Florida, that game has already been announced that it's sold out. So you're going to have that home field advantage. Obviously, we know. I mean, look. Tate Rodemaker went in there and handled that 90,000 last year. And so, I mean, you would hope that Cam Ward can go in there and not be scared of the Jort Army there in Gainesville. So,
Yes.
but we'll see, man. I think it's, again, you look at the talent rankings. Yes, it's and I do find it really interesting how the Florida schools are 12, 13, 14. Like, how
Yeah.
crazy is it that they are
That's
right there
wild.
like that?
Yeah.
But Florida still has a talented roster, slightly more talented than Miami, 12 versus 14. So I think at home with that sold out crowd and the talent that they have, Graham Mertz is a guy who's year 2 in the system, was a very efficient quarterback. So you get that experience coming back. But
That's
of
right.
course, you bring in Cam Ward. You have an experience, some experience on offense there. You have Damian Martinez at running back at Miami. Miami is not used to playing in a lot of crowd noise, so that
That's
could
true.
throw them for a little bit of a loop. We'll see. I think this game could come down to the end. If Miami remembers to take a knee, they might get out of there with a win. But, man, this one's going to be really, really interesting. Right now, we're going to get down to it in next week's show. I don't know that I can give a prediction for this one yet. I don't really have a winner yet. I want to lean Miami, but I also think that home field advantage and is, I still don't trust that coaching staff. I just don't.
Yeah.
But I do think that when you look at the home field advantage could be something that could play into Florida's, could be the one thing that puts it over the edge. But I'd say I probably lean Miami right now, but Miami should win this game. I think they should win this game, but man, it's too close to call for me right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It absolutely is. I mean,
either way, they're playing for second and third place.
Exactly. On one side of the on one side of the picture, Florida State did come in with a flat tire last year and basically walked all over them. And that defense, one of the best defensive performances I've seen in a long time, for sure. Tate Rodemaker, just showed up with his eyes and, they won the game. So that says something about that. But then again, Florida did not have, if we're going to give credit to Florida did not have Graham Mertz playing that game. They will have Graham Mertz in this game. They also have behind Graham Mertz, one of the best high school ranking QBs in DJ Lagway, who, obviously we don't know what he can do, but there's still talent there. They're still one of the most talented teams in the country, top 15 in that sense. And the game's at 3:30.
Yeah.
And the Swamp, I've yet to see a game in the Swamp. I'm hoping to do it hopefully next year, but I can only imagine what that'd be like, because when you play in front of 5 fans all the time down at Doak South, and then you come up to Jort's Stadium, it's going to be different. Right now, this game I've thought about all summer, Jesse, and I go back and forth on not who I think will win, Jesse, but who I need to win. Because let me just paint this really quick for you. If Miami wins, then we got to hear it all season until they play us. And
you better beat Florida too.
And you better beat Florida, right? Because if you don't, you're going to hear it even more.
Yep.
But if Florida wins, we all know that Florida's schedule is they ain't winning more than 5 games this season, right? So if one of those 5 games is against Miami, it basically crumbles all that Miami had been building up this offseason. So right now, I might lean towards the Fighting Jorts, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you say that, because when you talk about who you want or need to win, I think so when I look at it from like a Miami perspective, Miami should be good this year if they don't have a letdown season, right? And so I think when you look at from their perspective, I think you probably want Miami to lose, because you don't want Miami to have that type of year that gets them that momentum, that keeps them in the picture with recruiting and stuff like that. Whereas if Florida wins, like you talked about, with the way that schedule sets up, they might be doing a reset anyway.
Right.
You got to play both. And I think also I will say that with the automatic qualifier bids, the amount of ranked teams you play doesn't always matter. But if you do get into an at-large situation, Miami has a better chance of finishing the season ranked than Florida does. So maybe that would be the only reason you want them to win. Yeah. But I don't want either one to win, to be honest. I hope they end in a tie. So it will be interesting. But, I do think it's when you talk about Lagway, one thing that I was just thinking about in my mind is, like, I do think Graham Mertz is going to play. I think he's going to be your starter. I think he's going to start a majority of the season. A friend of mine that covers Florida said that, Napier, to his demise, is a very loyal guy. And so I think that, he believes he's going to play, but I think they're going to have packages. We've heard that he's had a really good spring.
Yeah.
And so I think he is going to have some packages where he's going to get to play. in that offense. And so that could be, he's a dynamic skill set guy. And that might be the one thing that if he looks like he's going to be legitimate, even as a freshman, that might help Billy save his job going into next year. So with that being said, Michael, let me just bring everybody up to speed here. This is Plant the Spear, and we are on our game day set right now here in Ireland. I got the green light behind me to signify that we're over here in Dublin. You can see the backdrop here. Just bringing you guys the fun topics from around the country as we get into Florida State. But the thing is, Michael, game day would not be complete without that sad story where they try and make you cry every single season. So I thought for our sad story this week, we're going to kick it to what Tom Rinaldi or whatever used to do all these. So speaking of things that are depressing, let's go ahead and do a Miami and Florida record prediction on this season.
Yes.
With that being said, I'm going to take some notes here so we can make sure we get this right. And get our final tally here. So we're going to bring up Florida first. If you're watching on YouTube, I brought a slide up here so we can kind of see these games as we go. Now, what I think is interesting about the schedule here is when I was putting this into a slide for YouTube, there was the SEC championship down here, but I went ahead and just chopped that off for Florida. We're not even going to focus on that. There's no point even keeping that on there. So we're just gonna get that one out of the way here. Now I know we're gonna have to make an initial pick here, so we're gonna give ourselves away a little bit on this one. But with that Florida one, or with that Miami game to start with, I think I'm gonna go at this point in time, and I could change next week. I'm gonna lean Miami on that one.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go with a first loss here for Florida.
Okay. I'm going to lean to Florida because I need Florida to win this game. It's not that I think they can win this game. I just need them to win this game because that's going to create more chaos for Miami.
I got you. So Samford Bulldogs, I think we can go ahead and pencil that both in as a win there. Although, hey, you never know.
You never know.
You never know. So at Texas A&M at home, this is going to be one 3:30. Probably going to be sold out there as well, depending on how their season starts off. And if they get dog walked by Miami, we'll see. But I think this is interesting because again, you got that top 10 that top 7 talented roster there with a good coach in Elko. But it is year 1. You are in year 3 with Napier, so you should probably come out in this game. Man, I don't know, dude. I think I might have to predict Texas A&M to take the win here.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take Texas A&M as well, too, because I just do not see Florida having the horses to sustain with what Texas A&M is going to be bringing into Gainesville.
Yeah, and then the next one, I think I will give them a little bit of a credit here. I think they're going to win this one at Mississippi State. That's a team that's starting over with their coaching staff. Even though you have to go to Stark Vegas, I still think they can get it done. That's just a program that's kind of finding their way since Coach Leach passed away.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And rest in peace, Coach Leach. Love you, man. Miss you. But this team is completely starting over. They had a terrible season last year. They have very little talented there. I think Florida actually I think they go in, they get this done. They feel good about where they're at right now before the brakes fall off.
Yeah. And here's an interesting one. You get a bye week. Yes. And then you get UCF at home. Now, UCF did get KJ Jefferson from Arkansas, and they were a dumpster fire last year and went in and beat Florida in the swamp. So very interesting to see how this one's going to play out. I think UCF is one of those teams. They had a step back year last year going up to Power 4 for the first year. I still think that this is going to be a tough game. And I think this one here, depending on how things go, like I have Florida at 2-2 right now. If you lose to UCF at home coming off a bye week, this might be the game that gets Billy Napier fired if you lose this one. Now, I will say that when you just look, let me kind of look here. I think, again, with just the talent side of things and being at home, I think this is a game that Florida should win. So Central Florida is 32nd in the country in the team talent ranking. So it's not really a bad roster, but I'm going to go ahead and give Florida the win here. A narrow one. I think it's going to be close.
You're so nice. You're really nice. I'm going to pick the Knights, baby, because I live in Orlando. And if my people are watching this, I don't want them to come and get me. So I'm going Knights, charge on. They're going to pull the upset off in Gainesville.
All right, now the next one, Tennessee. This is an interesting one. They've actually done pretty well against Tennessee, I believe, recently. But Tennessee, you got to go. You go to Knoxville. You got to play at Neyland. That game's probably going to be sold out, 100,000 plus.
Yeah.
And now they do have the young freshman playing this year, Nico at quarterback, but he'll have a couple games to get into sync there. I think we're going to learn a lot about Tennessee in that week 1 matchup against NC State. That's going to be a good game here in Charlotte to see how things go there. But man, I just think going on the road with possibly a couple losses under your belt already, I'm going to give the edge to the Vols here.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give the edge to the Vols here. Listen, I've been to Neyland Stadium. I remember when I went there when Oregon came to play Tennessee. It is one of the most electric stadiums in the country. Over 100,000 plus drunk volunteers screaming at you in orange. Yeah, even though that stadium looks like a dump, I'm taking Tennessee.
Yeah. So we'll put down another loss there for them. All right, we're equaling out now. We're getting close. Kentucky homecoming in Gainesville have not had a whole lot of success against Kentucky recently. I don't know, man. You got to win a game somewhere. They ran all over you last year. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but I don't know if that running back from Kentucky is still there this year.
No, he's gone.
He's gone.
Yeah.
Man, I want to pick them to go 0-12, but I'm about to pick a lot of losses here coming up. You know what? Let's go with a little upset here. I think they maybe knock Kentucky off. But you know what, man? Here's the thing with this one. Kentucky last year, I know everybody made a big deal about them losing to LSU or beating Louisville and Louisville losing to them and then going to the ACC championship. When you look at their losses last year, it was to Alabama, to Georgia, Tennessee, and I think maybe LSU or something there towards the end of the season. So they lost a lot. Like 3 of their 5 losses were against, Mizzou. 3 of their 5 losses at the end of that season came against teams that finished in the top 10. And then you also had a Tennessee, and I think a South Carolina was the one that kind of was a head scratcher there. I don't know, Michael. Yeah, let's go with a loss. That's a loss.
Okay. So here's the thing. Let me just give you a couple quick stats. Tennessee is all-time 84 and 20 cents. Or I'm sorry. Tennessee is where am I doing? Kentucky. Sorry. Florida has lost the last couple games to Kentucky the last couple times. And the thing about it, though, is that before that, Florida had won like an astronomical amount of games in a row, but they've struggled. That running back ran all over them. And so, yes, it would be easy for you to pick Florida to have Kentucky come in and lose that game. I'm going to call the upset. I think Florida gets this W against Kentucky. I know, but they've got to win somewhere. So I'm going to take the W here.
Yeah, see, I almost felt the same way. When I said, like, okay, is that running back gone? And you said yes. I felt like I was going to pick Florida to get the win there. I could see that one going either way. If I had to have a game I feel wrong about, it's that one. Now, they do get a bye week.
Yep.
And thank goodness, because they're going to need to rest up and take some ibuprofen because it's about to get ugly for them coming up.
Gosh.
Go ahead and make some off-season plans. Go to the beach, take a trip or something like that. Because things are about to get real for Florida coming up. You get Georgia in Jacksonville, neutral site. Last year, everyone talks about what we did against Georgia, and I'm like, hey, Florida fans, guess what? You got your doors blown off, and you had all your starters. So I don't think things are going to change this year. I still think that, it's a rivalry game, so maybe they can keep it close, but probably not. I'm going with Georgia here.
Yeah, Georgia is all-time 55 and 44 against Florida. They won the last 3. It's been not even close. Get me for Georgia.
All right, so we'll pencil in another loss there. At Texas, I mean, Texas doesn't have a whole lot of running backs, but Florida won't have a whole lot of wins. So give me the Longhorns in this one. On the road, a lot of talent in that Texas team. Yeah, I don't see it happening there.
That's so funny. Yes, Texas may not have a whole lot of running backs, but in the history of ever playing Florida, they're 2-0 against Florida. They have a 2-game winning streak. The last time they played was 1940. It's about to be 3. Give me Texas.
All right. So next is LSU at home. And man, I mean, you look at LSU, they have a lot of big pieces to replace. They're still a talented team. I just still don't think I'm going to pick them, even at home. I mean, now I will say this. I think Florida has the ability to pull an upset somewhere.
Yeah,
somewhere around here. If I had to nail it down, I would say Kentucky, LSU, maybe even Ole Miss. I could see maybe where one of those 3 games, because, and we'll get to Ole Miss in a second, but Ole Miss is getting a lot of hype, and they've won some games, but they still have never really beat the upper echelon teams.
That's right.
They might pull an upset here and there, but they still got their teeth kicked in by Georgia. I think it was last year, or the year before. I'm going to go with a loss against LSU. We're stacking them up, man.
We're stacking them up. Okay, so LSU is all-time 34-33 against Florida. It's been very tight, but LSU has a 5-game win streak against Florida. It's going to be 6. Give me LSU.
And with another loss. Ole Miss Rebels inside the swamp. Again, man, like I said, I could see where they upset somebody, but I don't think it's going to be this one. So give me another loss. It's going to be a long year for Florida. Now, they have some talent, and I feel like I might switch my Kentucky pick before we're all said and done.
Okay. Ole Miss and Florida are tied 12-12, each with wins. Florida has a 2-game win streak. Jesse, I'm going to call the upset here. Florida wins at home against Ole Miss.
Look out. That would be a massive upset, especially that late in the season. Now, have to go on the road to Florida State inside Doak Campbell Stadium. I think, again, it's going to be interesting to see what you have at the end of the season, whether it's an interim coach, whether it's DJ Lagway, what that team even looks like, what their motivation is. But, of course, I don't care if Tim Tebow himself comes down from heaven and plays quarterback, and Urban Meyer, gets a new heart and comes back to Florida and all that type of stuff. I'm still not ever going to pick Florida over Florida State. So give me another loss there. And I will go on record and say that I'm going to go ahead and flip my Kentucky pick, because I don't ever feel bad for Florida fans, but golly, man, I'm running out of paper to write down losses here. So,
listen,
give me Florida State.
Steve Spurrier could come back from wherever his restaurant is in Central Florida and start, and they can get Danny Warfel, they can get Jesse Palmer, they can get Chris Leak, they can get everybody they want to till the day comes blue. Florida State is bringing home the dub at Doak Campbell Stadium. It's over. It's done with. Give me Florida State.
All right, so that means I have the Gators going 4-8, and you have them going 5-7. So that's going to
look at me,
man. That's going to be a tough one, man. I don't know if that's enough to save Billy's job. Definitely, you're not going to make a bowl in either one of those record predictions, but it's going to be interesting, man, to see how it plays out. I mean, again, when you talk about some of the pieces that they do have, and I will say again, I think Florida's a better team than they get credit for. I just think they got a really, really tough schedule, and it stacks up really bad. I mean, you get some of the tough teams at home, but again, man, you got Georgia when they're peaking. You got Texas when they're peaking. You got Ole Miss when they're peaking. So we'll see how that plays out. Now let's talk about Miami. This is one, again, that's going to be really interesting. Year 3 for Mario Cristobal. You have above a 50% blue chip ratio. You have a talented roster, top 15 in the country. You got the quarterback you wanted. Your schedule is not that tough. I think this is kind of a put up or shut up year for Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes. I think they should win 10 games. I even left the ACC championship down here so they can at least see what it looks like. I know they're not really familiar. In case Miami fans are watching, that's a game that happens the first week in December in Charlotte. Yeah. You may have bad memories of the last time you went, but it does still exist.
It does it's still there.
Maybe you'll get there someday. So let's start out with game 1 against Florida. We already decided that one. Did you take Florida in that one?
I took Florida in that one.
Okay, so we'll give them an L over there, but I have Miami with that one, so we'll give them a win there. Game 2, Florida A&M. I mean, that would be the upset of all upsets. But I'm still going to go. I think we're both going to take a win there.
Yep.
When you look at Ball State, again, man, this is the thing with Miami. They don't really play anybody early in the season, just like they did the last few years, other than like one SEC team with Texas A&M the last couple of years. At South Florida, this is a game I think is going to be interesting. You look at what South Florida did against Alabama last year. It is in Tampa. I mean, I'm going to pick Miami to win, but you look at what South Florida did last year. And I know when you look at Syracuse, I know they didn't have their coach. They didn't have their quarterback. They were kind of playing almost like we were, even more disarmed in the bowl game. And they got They smoked Syracuse, like
Yeah.
45 to nothing or something like
Yep,
that.
they did. Yeah.
I'm gonna give Miami the win here, but I think it's gonna be closer. What's Lee Corso say? Closer than the experts
First
think.
thing. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Miami here, even though UCF really played Alabama super well.
Yeah.
I just don't think they have the talent to hang with Miami. And I think eventually, if Miami learns how to take knees, they will win the game.
Yeah. Now, when you look at the next one, Virginia Tech, this is a very interesting game because there's a lot of people that think Virginia Tech is going to be able to make it to the ACC championship and potentially get that playoff berth. They returned the most production in the entire country. Kyron Jones is good. Bayshaw Tootin is good. They got a good defense.
Yeah.
Here's my hang up. If this game was in Lane Stadium, I would take Virginia Tech to win. But when you look back at last year, they were really good at home and were terrible on the road. And so because of that, I understand it's Miami. I understand they're probably going to have like a buy one get six free type of deal, at Sam's Club or something like that. Buy a dozen eggs and get a Virginia Tech ticket for free. Just please somebody show up to this game to see if they can pack a crowd. Virginia Tech might even have more fans than they do there
Right.
because that is an awesome fan base. This is one that I could see them losing, but because it's in South Florida, because it's in Moral Gables, I'm going to take Miami to win this one.
Yeah, man, I know. I kind of went back and forth on this one, Jesse, because like you said, Tech is, they've been pumped up this season. People are speculating they're going to be 10-2. But until I see the season, I might change it halfway through the season. I might change this pick, but yeah, I'm going to take Miami to win this one.
I got you. Yeah, if it was in Blacksburg, I'd be all over Virginia Tech. But
Yeah.
I think just being in South Florida, it's more about Virginia Tech being away from home than Miami being at home. But speaking of being away from home, the next game they do have to go all the way out to California to play the Atlantic Coast team, California Golden Bears, which makes absolutely no sense. Like Miami being in an ACC championship, and so this one I think with the travel with Jade Knott, the good running back that they had. Or they have out of Cal. I think Cal is a sneaky, decent team. They just didn't play much defense last year. I'm going to take Miami in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to take Miami just because, again, it doesn't make sense that we're sending teams out to California. But yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean it's a long trip, but I'm going to still take Miami there. Then they get a week off and they get Louisville on the road. Now this is going to be interesting. Louisville did lose some pieces, but they did bring some guys back. They brought in a experienced quarterback from Texas Tech. It's going to be interesting to see if they can kind of get going again in year 2 under Jeff Brom. Last year they were really impressive year 1 under a new coach. To get to that ACC championship. But a lot of that had to do with kind of a weak schedule. I think Louisville is not the toughest place to play, but if it's at nighttime and maybe it's packed or something like that, we've seen some losses up there.
We've seen some freaking stuff there
in Louisville. We'll leave that Lamar Jackson one out of the conversation, but there's no Lamar Jackson for Louisville this year. Man, I want to pick Miami to lose this game, but I don't know that I can. But you also do have Florida State the very next week.
Yep.
There could be some look ahead there. I do think the week off beforehand does make a difference. I'm not 100% sure if Louisville has that same thing. Let's do it, Michael. Let's go with a loss here. Let's do it. Let's go with an upset.
Listen, I have been to 3 games to see Florida State play Louisville in that stadium. And no matter how many times Florida State has been the favorite, the better skill, the higher team, freaky stuff happens in that stadium. So I'm taking Louisville to hand Miami its second loss of the season.
I like it. I mean, Jeff Brom has a really good offense. So we'll just, we'll see how they can reload. They have some pieces on defense too now. So don't make no mistake. And then, of course, next is Florida State, that big game down in Coral Gables, down in Doak South. We're going to bring a lot of people down there. Just like Florida, man, I'm not picking Miami to win this one. I do think it's going to be a good game. Last year, it was pretty close, even with their freshman backup in. That game should have been 14 points with the fluky touchdown late, but it ended up being a 7-point game. I think it's going to be close. You're going to have to work for it. Maybe we have another like block at the rock type of situation, but I trust Mike Norvell more than I trust Mario Cristobal, and I think that's going to be the difference in this game. The Miami fans love to talk about what DJU can and can't do, but last time I think he went for like 320 and 3 touchdowns in a 30-point blowout over Miami.
Yeah.
So he knows how to win in Coral Gables. Give me Florida State to knock off Miami. And I will say this before I kick it back to you. There's a lot of people that are predicting Florida State to lose to Miami.
Yes, they are. I've seen it too. Listen, Florida State owns Doak Campbell South. And when those and that's
Miami only pays rent.
Miami only pays rent there. And when Florida State shows up, we walk into our house, we put our foot up on the couch, we do whatever we want, we eat your chips, we eat everything else, and then we leave. And we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna take that win streak to 4 straight, and Florida State gets the dub.
That's right. Get out my rental unit. So next up is the Duke Blue Devils. They get them at home. Manny Diaz getting a shot at his former team. Just don't think he has enough to do it this year. Give me Miami in that one.
Yep, same. Give me Miami in that one. Even though Duke has a 1-game win streak, that was when Mike Elko was there. That was when that was 2022. And so yeah, I don't think there's no way.
That's turned into a nice little rivalry, and now with Manny Diaz being back, that should be a heated contest. But I still think Miami gets it. Now at Georgia Tech, this will be interesting this year. I'm sure, man, they have been working on installing victory formation for this game. It'll be interesting if they get to use it. We've talked about it, and we've talked about it in this game. I think Georgia Tech is a better team than you think, man. But I still think Miami is going to find a way to go over there and get a win.
Okay. Obviously, I do not want Georgia Tech to lose to beat Florida State. I want Florida State, hopefully, to beat Georgia Tech. But man, Jesse, I just look at this game and I just can't get over the fact that they were one knee away from winning and they decided not to. And then Haynes King throws this incredible touchdown pass to win the game. Give me Haynes King to do it again.
Look out with the upset pick. Oh man, it's getting a little rough for Miami over here. All right, and so let's go to the next one here. You get a bye week, then you get Wake Forest. I don't think there's any argument there. I think they smoke Wake Forest.
I think they smoke Wake Forest.
Next up, you have at Syracuse. Man, Miami's putting in. They better be stacking up some frequent flyer miles here because they're going to be doing a lot of traveling. It's year one for Syracuse. They do have Kyle McCord. They do have a couple of pieces there that I do like. Fran Brown, I think, brings some experience over from Georgia. But, year one and kind of a rebuild versus Miami, I think Miami does get the win there.
Yeah, I agree too. I know, Syracuse is doing their rebuild right there, and they're going to have, I like their coach. I think over the course of the next 3 years, if he gets time, he'll have them decent to be bowl eligible. But I just don't think they have the horses to run with Miami this year.
All right, man, here we go. I have Miami at 10-2, and you have them down at 8-4. So I hope you're right, because I would love to see that 8-4 season. Because if they go 8-4 with Cam Ward at quarterback in year 3, all 5 of their fans are going to be pissed off. You can guarantee that. There might only be 3 fans somewhere at one of their games next year. But that's interesting, man. I think Miami should be good. I just think when you look, like, they could certainly lose that Virginia Tech game. They certainly could go 9-3. And just to put it on record here, if you haven't watched it yet, in our win-loss score prediction, I do have Florida State also going 10-2. I did say that I lean 11-1 more than I lean 9-3, and I know that you had Florida State at 11-1. So just to kind of put our opinion in our takes in the hat there as well with the big 3 programs from the state of Florida. But I could definitely see where if Miami goes 10-2 and Florida State goes 10-2, I could see them having a rematch in that ACC championship. That'll be interesting because I think Clemson's got a pretty tough schedule this year. I'm not wholeheartedly buying in on Clemson this year, taking some giant step. I think Virginia Tech is going to be the outlier there. I think if they do upset Miami down in Coral Gables and they win the games they're supposed to, Virginia Tech has a real shot to make that ACC championship. And NC State has that weak schedule this year. But yeah, I think 10-2, you might be looking at a rematch, which would be really fun. And I think that's what they wanted the entire time when they set it up in the Atlantic and the Coastal back in the day before they did away with divisions.
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole thing of bringing Miami in, was that you would get Florida State and Miami twice a year because they would find themselves in the ACC championship. Miami didn't hold their end of the bargain. Florida State, we didn't also hold the end of our bargain for some time. So I'll be fair to that. Yes, I think there are about 5 teams that I think are vying for the ACC championship. I think number 1, obviously, is Florida State as a repeat champion. I think you have Miami, number 2. I would put NC State in there as another team that is always tricky. You can never just count them out.
Yeah.
I think Virginia Tech, as you've given us the data and shown us that, I think they're a sneaky pick there. And then I do think until you see a consistent decline, I do think you got to put Clemson in there. But I really think those top three are Florida State, Miami, and I'm going to say NC State at 3. You'll probably put Virginia Tech at 3.
Yeah, and I think NC State they have Louisville's schedule of last year.
Yeah.
They basically miss a lot of the big boys. So it'll be interesting to see, man, who actually gets to Charlotte. I think the margin for error is going to be slim this year.
Yes.
But that actually brings me to our next part of the show. We're gonna get some hot takes going here, Michael. I'm gonna be honest. A lot of my takes are actually kind of lukewarm. Some of yours are nuclear, so we're gonna see how it plays out. And we're gonna do some national ones first, and then we're gonna get into Florida State as we get ready to break down this Florida State Georgia Tech game for you guys. You know, I need the crowd noise. Like when we mentioned Florida State Georgia Tech, the crowd
exactly.
Get hyped. They're a little quiet on game day. You know, we got the time change we're working with here, so never mind. There we go. So I got my first national hot take here, man. I don't think a Big Ten, SEC, or ACC team is going to finish undefeated. Wow. I was going to say a Power 4 team, but I don't know much about the Big 12. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how they're going to eat each other. But, man, I just think when you look at Oregon and Ohio State, and then you also throw Michigan, who could at least cause chaos in there. Penn State as well. When you look at the SEC, like I think Georgia's going to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to be undefeated. You have to go to Texas. You have to play Alabama this year. Yeah. Alabama has to play Georgia this year. You know, they almost never I think we play Alabama more often in the regular season than Georgia does. They just meet in Atlanta a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and then like I said, Texas should be another good team too. Oklahoma's got a lot of talent. I don't think any of those teams. I think you're going to have a lot of one-loss teams. I think you're going to see a lot of parity in the game this year, man. But I think with the automatic qualifier bids, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You'll see some teams earn it now. The the at-large bids, it will come into play. But
yeah,
I don't know, man. I just don't see there being really kind of any teams going undefeated this year. I think there's that's with the expansion. You know what I mean? I think that makes a big difference. I probably would have picked Ohio State to go undefeated. But putting Oregon in there, man, I think that's going to be tough. And, of course, that includes the conference championship game as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think that's a lukewarm. I think that's a hot take because I think those SEC, Big Ten, ACC schools might be, trying at your door if they knew your address. Saying that right. Team's not going to go undefeated. Man, that is a good take. Well, here's my hot take of the season. Number 1, Georgia will not win the national title this year. I know everybody's already put Georgia as the number 1 team. They got 46 of the 65 available first place votes in the AP poll. Everybody's already penciling them in as in the playoff. And I'm not saying they won't make the playoff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I think now that you've gone to 12 teams, it becomes much harder. Not only do you have to win 13 games, or at least, vie for 13 games. You got to win the SEC to get in unless you're going to be an at-large bid. But now you have to win 3 games if you're one of those top 4 seeds to get to the national championship. And I just don't see Georgia repeating as a national title. I think they get in the playoff. I think they make it far. I just don't see them winning the title.
I hear you, man. And I was just looking it up real quick. Ohio State does go to Oregon. They go to Penn State. So that could be a little bit tricky there. Then, of course, they do get Michigan at home. But, again, like we both said, man, neither one of us are really high on that Michigan team after everything that's changed there. Now, Oregon, again, they do have to play Ohio State, like we said, but they do get them at home. They do play, Michigan on the road. So you could see maybe an upset there. And then they get Washington at home, man. I think, I'm not a Big Ten hot take here, but I think Oregon might win the Big Ten this year, even though Ohio State might be the favorite. I mean, Dan Lanning's doing some things out there.
Yes, he is.
I think my next not so hot take, but my hot take is I think the ACC does get 2 teams in the playoffs this year. I think you will get 2 teams in there because I think the premise of that is going to be built off the ACC is going to be a better conference than people think. I think you're going to have a lot of these teams, the Virginia Techs, the NC States, the Miamis, the Clemsons, the Florida States that are going to be 9 to 10 win teams that are going to be vying for ranked spots. I think it's going to be a good enough year for the conference that you're either ACC title game winner and loser or that number 3 team, depending on how things shake out. You don't have divisions this year, so it'll be stacked up from top to bottom. I think the ACC does get 2 teams in.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, man. I like that because that means that you're probably looking at either Miami, Florida State, or Florida State, Clemson. Because I'm just going to assume that Florida State's going to be in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So here's my hot take: one of the group of 5 that whoever makes the playoff, because right now I only think one can. They will go past the first round.
Interesting.
Because
That's a real spicy one.
that's a real spicy one. Because if you're a group of 5, you're very likely, because there's I think the committee screws Florida State. Well, they definitely screw group of 5. There's no way you're going to be able to be in the top 4. So you're likely going to be in that first round game. You're likely going to be on the road unless you're hosting, right? And so you're looking at App State, Boise, Liberty, Memphis, Miami, Ohio, or USF as kind of the top 6 teams that have the ability to make the college football playoff. And I think one of them, whoever it is, I just have the sneaking suspicion that they're going to win that first round game, whoever it is against, and they're going to go to the second round. I'm not saying they're going to go past that. I just think they make it out of the first round.
Yeah, and I think Memphis would be interesting if they make it, as if they're a team that's on your schedule that you hopefully beat, gets into the playoffs as that G5 team. And if they can play any resemblance of defense this year, I think they can be a team to do it. It just depends on that matchup. Because like you said, they're going to be on the road more than likely. They're not going to get a bye. So that one's going to be interesting to see. And don't you have a third national hot take? Because I only brought 2 hot takes to the table on this one.
No. My third national hot take is, even though you just predicted Florida to go 5-7 and I predicted Florida to go 4-8, I believe Billy Napier will get another year. I think when they hired him, they knew this schedule was coming. Yes, he has had a lot of talent. Yes, he has struggled. I think last season was the second. Correct me if I'm wrong. Second season they didn't make a bowl game, and so I know that this is like the third show me season, whatever. But I also think when you look back to Florida State, right? Florida State came in at 2020. They went 3-6, I believe, and then they went 5-7, and then in the third season they went 10-3. So yes, I understand the third season is the season in which they got to show something. If Mike Norvell had not showed something, I still think they wouldn't have fired him. And I just don't think Florida is going to fire Billy Napier. I think they need some consistency. And I think they look at the schedule and say, you know what? We're going to give you one more pass. That's my third national hot take.
Yeah, I could see that, man. I really could. I mean, if things, with the stuff that they have with Lagway and stuff like that, we'll see how it goes. I do think you do kind of look at what Florida State has done in the past, and I think you kind of look at like, okay, well, they stuck by their guy. It worked out.
Yep.
We'll see how it goes. But yeah, man, I think it's going to be interesting if he can save his job. I think continuity is a big thing, but I think that program is ready to win. And, you talked about they've missed a bowl 2 out of 3 years. Probably wish they'd have missed that other one because they were kicking field goals down by 30 points against Oregon State.
That's right.
You didn't really make a bowl that year either. But, looking at 2025, they do have South Florida at Miami, Florida A&M, Georgia, Florida State, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Texas, at Kentucky, at LSU, at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M. Yeesh. So it's not getting
better.
It's not getting any better. And, we said this year that maybe you don't fire him because you don't want a new coach to come in and wear that whipping.
Right.
I don't know that you want someone. You just gotta. I don't know, man. I don't envy that situation, but I'm happy for him.
Yes.
Because, congratulations. I love
it.
Now, let's get on to Florida State and Georgia Tech. Let's talk about this game. We got some hot takes for Florida State that we're going to throw out. Here goes the crowd. Everybody's going crazy here. Everybody's going crazy here. That's right. We're going crazy here in Dublin. All right. We got the crowd into it. Let's go, Michael. So I got some hot takes here. And if you're on social media, this one's going to make sense. If you're not on social media, you're going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? My first hot take for Florida State is Jimbo Fisher will be an analyst at FSU. And of course, I mean that with total sarcasm because I don't believe that to be the case. But we do have had Jimbo sightings at Planet Fitness in Tallahassee. He's over in Orlando or in Ireland right now.
Ireland.
Like, what are the chances he just happens to be in Ireland? I've heard some reasoning why he's there, and it's completely not related, but it's awfully big of a coincidence. I totally mean that as a joke, but we'll see. I think we have some bad blood with Jimbo, but he could recruit. So, hey, we'll see.
That's great. That's perfect.
But now on to the real hot takes. That would be a real spicy take.
That would be spicy.
And that's why I don't like spicy stuff. So I ain't going with that. I think DJU, this is a lukewarm take, but I feel good about it. I think DJU throws for over 3,000 yards for the first time in his career. We've talked about this before. He's started 3 years so far and has never thrown over 3,000 yards. I was just looking at some PrizePicks numbers, which we're going to get into in a minute. They only have him at 2,400 yards. So maybe this is like Texas Pete hot, maybe not jalapeno hot,
Mm.
but I think he gets it done. I think he throws for over 3,000 yards. And Mike Norvell's offense, as we know, we've talked about before in our DJU deep dive episode, Mike Norvell has never had a quarterback that started every single game for him, finished with less than 3,000 passing yards. So I think DJU does get it done through the air this year and hits that 3,000 yard mark.
I love it. I love that hot take. And here I'm going to add on to your hot take for Florida State. I think not only does DJU is 3,000 plus yards, I think he throws 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I think he has 500 plus rush yards, which would make him, this is my hot take, a Heisman finalist this year. Clemson fans, I know you didn't like to hear that, but I think he's going to be a Heisman finalist this year.
Yeah, that's a real hot take, because could you imagine if DJU comes to Florida State and wins a Heisman after Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson did not? Like, man, that would be crazy. But yeah, I think he's going to be up there. I think he's going to have success. I think, even to add on, let's add a little more hot sauce on top of this. I think he's going to have a 60 plus completion percentage this year.
Come on.
Maybe even around 62, because that's where Mike Norvell's career is, 62.7, I think. Now, my next one is going to be, I think Adam Fuller is cooking. I think they have reloaded this defense. This doesn't sound spicy at first, but when you think back to our defensive preview episode, remember, we talked about this year's slate of offenses is a lot tougher.
Yeah.
You have, I think, 4 in the top 25, 7, I think, in the top 50. You only had 1 and 4 last year. The average ranking jumps up like 30 spots. It's a tougher slate of offenses by far. I think Florida State finishes with another top 25 defense for a third year in a row. We know they've been top 20 the last 2 years. Maybe I'll drink a little milk with my hot sauce here to cool it down. Maybe they don't go top 20, but I do think they have another top 25 defense, and I think it carries this team this year.
Oh, man. I like that. I actually like that one. Okay. This is probably the one that's nuclear. I think Florida State is going to be ranked first in the first college football playoff poll this season.
Michael, I think we better call the fire department.
We better. The building is on fire right now.
Well, I hope you're right. You're right. But that's a spicy one, especially knowing with the conspiracies that go on behind the scenes.
Exactly. The reason I think so is because of those conspiracies. I think you're going to see some early upsets that continue to move, and Florida State continues to win. And I think at that venture, when that first college, because it comes out around October, if I'm correct.
It's like week 8 or something.
Yeah,
like
like week 8 or something like that. I think by that time period, you're going to see some of the upsets that are happening there. And I think Florida State, now again, guys, this is just for fun. I don't know if this is actually going to happen, but this is a hot take. This is a take that no one in the country outside of Florida State fans might agree with. But I think Florida State might be ranked first in the college football playoff when it first comes out.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that, I think you want to have a hot enough take that it's a hot take. You know what I mean? But you also want there to be a little bit of chance that it comes true.
Right.
Now, this next one doesn't sound so spicy again. I know. Hey, look, I'm over here. I'm over here eating some sweet stuff. I got a sweet tooth, Michael. I'm not a spicy guy. But I do think this would be sweet if it happens. And I think Florida State gets 2 special teams, probably more than 2. I'm going to go with more than 2. But I think Florida State's going to have more. At least double-digit special teams touchdowns for the first time since 2013. And that's the stat that makes this a little bit spicy, because when you look at all, the returners that we've had and Keon and all these guys, we know they struggled on punt for a little while there with guys who couldn't figure out how to catch the punt. But it's surprising, man. We have not had 2 special teams touchdowns since 2013. And I think with Deuce Spann, who we've seen be able to break some for touchdowns. Then you bring in Jalen Lucas, who is one of the best kick returners in the Big Ten last year. You also have some young, talented guys that could fill that punt returner role. I think Florida State's going to be – I think special teams is going to be one of the difference makers for this team this year from all aspects of special teams. But I think the return game is going to play a big part, and I think we're going to get multiple touchdowns this year.
Absolutely. I think that's good. I like that. I like it. It'd be nice to finally actually have, we've seen the growth under Mike Norvell of our special teams unit. So it'd be nice to have a consistency of that back-to-back year. All right, here's my third and final one. I think Malik Benson is on the Biletnikoff, if I've said that correctly, finalist list at the end of the season for one of the best wide receivers in the country.
I love it. I'll even tack onto there. I think he's Florida State's first 1,000-yard receiver since Tamorian Terry.
Come on,
let's spice it up a little bit. Why not?
Let's go.
I did see some people say that they think Roydell Williams or Toafili or one of the two said that they could be the first 1,000-yard back since Cam Akers. I think there's so much of a depth in that room.
Exactly.
I don't think that's going to be the case.
It's going to be hard.
But I think I think for Florida State to get where they want to be, I think Malik Benson needs to be that guy. I
Yep.
think you have some other guys in that receiver room that are going to step up that I'm excited about. We've heard good things late in camp, but I think Malik Benson is getting ready to have a breakout year. I think when you look at the speed and DJ U's big arm, I think you're going to see a lot of explosive plays over the top, especially when balanced out with that run game. So those are our hot takes for the 2024 season.
I'm gonna get crushed.
Someone is going to clip yours for sure. And someone's going to clip mine and dump some Texas Speed on it because it's not that hot. Texas Speed, give us a sponsorship.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this Georgia Tech Florida State game. We're going to get into a little bit of a quick preview here. If you want an in-depth deep dive, make sure you go to our channel and check out the Florida State versus Georgia Tech preview. But we're going to talk about this game here. We're going to just kind of get into some overall themes here, kind of how we see this one playing out. Then we're going to do some picks on some numbers and things like that. So Florida State comes into this game looking to start their season off on the right foot, 1-0 in the ACC, 1-0 on the season. But Georgia Tech is a team that's been picked to pull the upset by a number of people.
Yeah.
You look at Brent Key, came in, took over a floundering program, got them to 7-6 in a bowl win last year. Not to make you nervous, but he is 4-0 against ranked ACC teams. So it's going to be tough, man. It's going to be he's got some kind of magic up his sleeve or whatever. But they did have a really up and down season last year. I mean, you look at they lost a barn burner against Louisville, and then they go on to like beat Miami, but then they lose to Boston College. You know, it's just, man, they had such an up and down season. They're going to be looking for more consistency this year, but they did beat ranked UNC. They did play a Brock Bauerless Georgia tough. They did beat UCF in the bowl game, so they have a little bit of momentum coming into this year. Obviously, what we talk about here is the offense for Georgia Tech. This is where they can hurt you the most, and that is led by Haynes King. Georgia Tech does bring back 83% of last year's production on offense, and they averaged over 31 points per game. So this is a legitimate offense. As we talked about with Haynes King, he started all 13 games last year, threw for over 2,800 yards through the air, 27 touchdowns, added another 737 on the ground, 37 total touchdowns. He got third-team All-ACC honors. He's a legitimate dual threat guy. I think with this one, the thing with him last year, and we'll see if he takes that step this year, is inconsistency and turnovers were his biggest issue. So when you look back at last year, he had 16 interceptions and 4 fumbles for the turnover department. And then when you look at inconsistency, this is something that stood out to me. So early on in the season, he averaged through the first 5 games, 294 passing yards and 3 touchdowns per game. In the last 8 games, that average dropped to 170 yards and only 1.5 touchdowns per game. So there's a lot of inconsistency. There's some turnover problems there. He's not a bad passer by any means. He can stretch the field. They was actually tied for 12th in the highest percentage of deep passes. So they are going to try and take some shots on you. Now, I will say when you look at those deep shots, this is an interesting stat. Last year, he was 53rd in completion percentage on those deep passes at only 31.4%. He had the 10th highest turnover-worthy play percentage on deep throws. And this is the one that stands out to me. He threw the most interceptions on deep passes in all of Power 5. So there will be some opportunity to get some plays here. But, man, I think really when it comes to Haynes King in this offense, you know, we'll get into some of the other personnel in a second, but you know, he is a guy that can hurt you with his legs. So I think it's going to be that Thomas Castellanos type of situation last year. It's not his arm that scares you. It's his legs, but his legs make enough things happen with his arm that he can kind of get you both ways. Now, he does some questionable stuff when you get pressure on him. I'm sure Chris Winke's up there holding his breath, you know, co-offensive coordinator, former Seminole. But, man, Haynes King is the key to this offense. So it'll be I think their offense will live and die on the day that he has. And I think as long as you can keep him contained on the ground, I think I like our chances here.
Yeah. I actually think, you know, the more and more I've watched film on this game and the on Georgia Tech, the more and more I begin to believe that I actually think Adam Fuller's plan is going to be, listen, Haynes is going to get his. He's going to get his on the ground. I think what you don't want is him getting his that's attached to points. I think you're going to give up a couple of scrambles here or there because, you know, they're going to have design runs. But I think what Florida State's really going to try to do is they're going to try to allow, at least at the beginning of the game, that front 6, you know, because they run a 4-2-5. So they're really going to try to allow that front 6 to control the line of scrimmage. If that front 4 especially can prevent the big runs breaking out and those linebackers can keep him from gaining 30, 40 yards, you know, just maybe that, you know, those 5 little yards there, And then the problem that hurt Florida State, if you go back and watch last year, especially against Boston College, is that they would get Boston College into these 3rd and long situations, and then Castellanos would convert it with his legs, not throwing, with his legs. So if you get Georgia Tech and the 3rd and long, you just do not want Haynes King to be converting it, because he's going to try to do it with his legs. So I think based on what I've seen from the game film from last year, and kind of thinking through how Adam Fuller has generally attacked a mobile quarterback, I think he's going to allow his secondary to kind of stay back, play that cover 4 in that 4-2-5, and then allow his front 6 to really try to control the line of scrimmage. I think if you see Haynes King's breaking out a lot, I think you might switch. I think you might see switch, and you might see Adam Fuller bring a safety down, whether that's Shaheem, whether that's Dante or Conrad Hussey there. But I think that's kind of how you want to do it, because you just don't want the explosive plays getting behind you.
Yeah, and like you've talked about before on our prediction episode or preview episode, they run a very similar offense to Florida State. They like to live on those explosive plays, so you're going to want to limit them as well. And the thing is, if you can sit back in coverage, when you look at his numbers, he actually threw more interceptions when you just sit back in coverage and make him beat you with his arm. So I think that's going to be interesting as well. Now, I mean, again, he likes to call his number a lot on read options and RPOs. 66% of his rushing yards did come on design runs compared to 34% on scrambles. He's not scared to call his own number. He averaged 6.14 yards per carry last year, had 27 runs of 10-plus yards, which was actually more than Trey Benson did in 2023 at Florida State on less carries. So if you let him get loose, he can hurt you. I mean, he was a top 5 rushing quarterback last year. Now, for his good sake, not so much ours, he does get 3 of his 5 top targets back from a year ago, including Eric Singleton Jr., who had a breakout season as a freshman, led the team in receptions, yards, and also touchdowns, had 48 receptions, 714 yards, and 6 touchdowns as a true freshman. So he comes back. He'll be joined by Malik Rutherford, and former Alabama transfer Christian Leary also returns. They got a pretty decent receiving core. But, man, I just really like our secondary in this matchup. So the thing, too, that I went back and looked at, as you know, we did our episode, and I went back and wrote the article to touch some things up. I did notice a couple of things that stood out. When you look at this, we talked about size early on with them losing their tight end. Those 3 receivers that we just named that are their top 3 returning guys, none of those guys are over 6 foot.
That's right.
And when you look at Florida State secondary, they're 6 foot or greater. So you're going to have a size advantage on the back end. You're going to have a little bit of a talent advantage as well. I also did notice that those receivers did a lot worse in man coverage, a lot worse. A lot of their production came against zone coverage, and we know that Adam Fuller likes to put his corners on islands and let those guys work in man coverage, and they have the guys to do it. So, man, I feel good about Florida State being able to kind of limit this passing offense just when you look at some of the things we just talked about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Florida State's defense, I think Adam Fuller will be able to implore two of the best corners in the country right now with Zaire Thomas and also French Cypress, who was good last year, but has only gotten better. What we believe based on preseason camp reports and preseason camp reports and stuff like that. And so I think you're going to have those 2 lockdown corners. I think you're running Kevin Knowles or Earl Little Jr. out there on the slot receiver as well. I think those are 2 pretty good corners there. You're getting them back. You're getting Knowles back in his natural position at corner at the nickel there. Earl Little can play that other slot corner there. You got Shaheem back there in the back. And I think with the rotation between Dante Brown, who had incredible stats and production at UCF, and Conrad Hussey, who's an up-and-comer with a lot of talent, I think, man, that back 5 there, you feel very comfortable and confident that they're going to be able to I won't say shut down, but to be able to hold that wide receiver, which is really going to force the onus on Haynes King in that running back room to make some plays. And if that front 4 with Marvin Jones Jr.
I wish we had both of them, to be honest.
It'd be great, right?
We wouldn't be worried about receiver this year.
So true. I'm so sorry. Marvin Jones Jr. with Pat Payton, with Josh Former and Daryl Jackson, and then Slow Hey. Like you got all those people there on that line there. And then, of course, with Cam Riley and Blake Nicholson at the linebacker space, I think right now Adam Fuller believes that they can they can handle that front of Georgia Tech and try to keep that rushing game at bay. They're going to run a lot. Georgia Tech is also going to try, very similar to Florida State. We talked about this in our preview episode. They're going to try to get you east and west. They're going to do a lot of east and west, screen, bubbles, throw it out, and then try to hit you over the top. And I just think Adam Fuller wants to say, hey, front five, you guys take all that east and west stuff. We're going to have our corners and our safeties right here to cover anything that comes out, and then just adjust as they go. Remember, Adam Fuller is the king of the halftime adjustment, right?
Exactly. The guardian of the goal line.
That's right. That's right.
A wise man once said. But I think you're right, man. And if they do decide to run it, DJ Lundy was the number 2 graded linebacker against the rush per PFF last year. I think you got 650 pounds of human in the middle of that defensive line. I think you're going to do well with that. But they do have a tough rushing attack to stop. I mean, you have Jamal Haynes, who comes in as the leading rusher last year, returns this year, 1,000-yard rusher, 6.1 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns. Last season in the Power 5, Jamal Haynes was top 25 in the number of missed tackles forced, runs of 10-plus yards, and breakaway run percentage, which is design runs over 15 yards. So, again, man, when you put him alongside of Haynes King, that's a pretty tough duo to stop on the ground. Now, again, I think we're going to be better against the run this year on defense, but you're going to have to do it against a good offensive line for Georgia Tech. I mean, they had a top 15 rushing attack averaging over 204 yards per game. They returned 4 out of 5 of their starters, including an all ACC center and right tackle. Man, it's a good team. You know what I'm saying on offense. They're going to be good. Now the defense, again, man, not so much the same story. Terrible on defense last year. Just really not much there. And again, they do bring in a new defensive coordinator. The ex co-coordinator or the coordinator at Duke, Tyler Santucci, I think his name is. Also the co-DC at A&M. So I think they're going to have a better scheme this year. I just don't know that they have the personnel to make some gigantic jump on defense. You know, they were 131st in rushing defense. I don't see them just all of a sudden jumping into top 50.
No.
And, you know, when you look at Florida State, I think our strength, obviously, this year projects to be that run game. And so I think you should be able to move the ball on them. I think you should run it until they prove that they can stop it. Correct. And when they load the box to do it, I think you kind of give them a taste of their own medicine and you hit them over top with the explosive plays.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Just like we said earlier when we were talking about USC and LSU, listen, you can bring in talented players from the transfer portal. You can bring in a new coordinator with Tyler Santucci from Duke, who had a pretty good scheme against Florida State last season, but Duke had better talent than this Georgia Tech defense had. And so I just don't think you're going to jump from almost the worst in the country to one of the best. You might be able to meet somewhere in the middle. You might go from 108 to maybe 70th in the country, but I don't think it's going to be such a significant jump that you're going to have to necessarily be worried. Now, are they able to play up above their level? Well, every team is able to play that one game above their level. I just don't think they'll be able to do it consistently. I actually think Florida State will be able to wear them down over time because Mike Norvell's going to want to run that ball. So run it until, like you said, until they can't prove they can stop it. And then I think DJ with that arm, you're going to see a lot of deep shots. I think you're going to see not even just deep shots, not even just the 20-plus shots. I think you're going to see a lot of 10 to 15, that 10 to 15 range. I think you're going to see east and west as well too. And it'll be interesting to see if their corners can cover our wide receivers because we have skill at wide receiver. We have length at wide receiver. And so it'll be interesting to see how they match up there. I just don't think at the end of the game that you're going to see this defense actually have that much of an impact on this. And that's why I feel good about Florida State's offense against their defense.
Yeah, and they were 108th in explosive plays last year. They were pretty bad on third down defense as well. Yeah. So I think Florida State should be able to move the ball on them. I think if you can hold that offense under 30 points, I really like and I think they will. I really like what Florida State can do in this game. So before we give you our prediction and scores, let's do a couple of quick projections. Now we're gonna kind of hit the hurry up button here because we are coming up on 2 hours here. And one thing that I wanted to include in this is the PrizePicks segment that PrizePicks, if you guys know, is daily fantasy, and you can get started with those guys. It's super easy. You don't have to create no crazy lineups or bet against anybody else. You can just go against yourself and the number that they give you, and you can get started by using code SPEAR and get a 100% deposit match up to $100. I did it last year. I'm still playing off house money. So make sure you take advantage of that. That is code SPEAR at sign up. We appreciate you guys supporting those that support us. So Michael, let's talk about some numbers here in this prize pick segment. I'm just going to throw a couple at you, and we're just going to do a quick over or under here. So,
Okay.
looking at some pass yards in this one, man, this one's interesting. DJU is projected at 232.5. I am going to go under on that.
Say it one more time. GJU's at 2 what?
232.5. And for reference, he did average around 215 yards per game last season. Or excuse me, the last 2 seasons combined, he averaged around 215 yards per game. I think they're just going to, they're going to run the ball so much in this game. I'm going to take the under on that. But I think still, if he throws for around 2 bills and a touchdown and maybe no interceptions, I think that's plenty enough for DJ in the first game. I just think we're going to run it so much. I'm going to take the under on that.
Well, if I said DJU is going to have 3,000 yards, I've got to take the over on this, right? This is going to set it up. So I'm going to go over by not much, but just a little bit over that.
I got you. Now, Haynes King, on the other hand, 193.5. And this is what's interesting, man, because under 200 yards, I immediately almost want to go over.
Mm-hmm.
But Florida State's got one heck of a pass defense. So, man, I feel like that's a really tough number. I think that if you do hold him under 193, they're going to have a hard time winning. But, we just talked about that last 8 games last year really fell off a cliff. So, man, I really want to go over on this one. I do, but I might. You know what? Let's go a little spicy on this one. Let's go with the under. But it's going to be close, man. It's going to be close.
Yeah, I
want to say over because it's the first game of the season. I really do.
I do too. I want to go over, and I'm going to go over. And the reason is because just what you said, it's the first game of the season. The defense, even though they face this offense every time in practice because it's very similar, I just think it's different because you're just not. I've seen how they kind of disguise some of their playing. So I'm gonna go with the over. I think it's gonna be slightly over that.
Yeah. Now, if I had to put some actual money on it, I'm probably going to take the over.
Yeah.
So now let's look at some receiving yards. I think what's interesting here, Malik Benson at 60.5. Now, I told you earlier, I think they're going to get a couple of deep shots in. And so I'm nervous about this one. I'm not confident in it, but I think you might see Malik Benson get the over here. And then I'll give you let's do a 3-for-1 special here.
Okay.
Jaylen Brown is at 26.5 receiving yards. I still think Malik Benson is going to be your leading receiver, but if Jaylen Brown is who we think he is, I think that 26.5 number is pretty easy to get the over on there.
Yep.
And then Ja'Kai Douglas at 36.5. I feel like I could probably see Ja'Kai getting over 36. Now, I can't go the over on everybody and us throw for under 240 yards, but because you got to throw Morlock in there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, 26.5 for Jaylen Brown, 36.5 for Ja'Kai Douglas, 60.5 for Malik Benson. I'm going to go over on Benson, over on Brown. Screw it. Let's go over on Ja'Kai Douglas too.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to go.
That defense is bad.
Yes, it is.
But their pass defense was okay, remember?
Yeah, their pass defense was ranked, I think, 53rd in the country, 53rd or 56. I can't remember exactly. But they were, gosh, I had looked it up. Whatever. Okay. I'm going to go under on Benson. And the reason I told you was because I think Georgia Tech is going to assume that Benson is the heir apparent number 1 to Keon Coleman. And I think they're going to try to shut him down. So I'm going to go under 60.5 yards, but I'm going to go over on Brown and Douglas based on that reason, because they're going to try to shade the defense, at least the pass coverage, towards more Malik Benson. I think you're going to see Douglas and Brown with a lot more yardage, and I think they're going to hit the over.
I could see the over on Benson because I think you might hit like a 40, 50-yard pass. I think they're going to take the top off, and I think that might happen. Now, Georgia Tech's wide receiver, their leading wide receiver, Eric Singleton, is around 57.5 yards, so that might be a little tough number there. But let's go let's close this out, the last one, with rush yards. And I think this one was interesting because I got some free money on this one, Michael. I think I hit earlier in the week. DJU's rushing total was the over-under was at 20.5 yards now. Or excuse me, it's at 20.5 right now. I got it at 18.5. And when I saw 18.5, I was like, over. Let's hit all that. Let's put the mortgage on that. I think you're going to get over 14 yards.
Yeah.
First off, I think the way even rushing is calculated in college, it does include sack yards. So you have to factor that in too. But this is supposed to be a good offensive line. Georgia Tech was pretty terrible at creating pressure last year in sacks.
Right.
So I don't think you're going to be having a lot of negative yardage from DJU. I think you are going to see him be a big part of the run game. I think he's going to go over that 20 number.
Yeah, I agree. It's over. I think you're going to see some design runs, especially if they get into 3rd and 2, or even 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, or if they go for it on 4th down and it's 4th and 1, 4th and 2. You're going to see that. I also think you'll see design runs. I got the over on that.
All right, now Haynes King, 41.5 rushing yards. I took the over on this one. I'm not going to lie. I think he has to run for over 41.5 yards for them to even be successful. I would hope that there are some yardage taken off of his total from some sacks that we get created with our 2 defensive ends and that defensive line. I think you will see some of that, but man, I think he will hit the over. I think it's just the first game, man. Again, and we know that mobile quarterbacks have given us some trouble in the past. I think he goes over on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he goes over. I think he has one big run. I think he gets like a 20 or 30 yard or somewhere, and we're like freaking out. But I think outside of that, he's pretty much hailed to the 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 yard runs. What you don't want, again, is him getting runs that are attached to scores.
Yeah, and to close out this prize pick segment, let's do a little bit. Let's hit the running backs on this one. 2-for-1 special. Roydale Williams, 67.5 yards. Lawrence Toafili, 43.5 yards. I think we're going to run the ball all over him. I think we're going to put up 180 to 200 yards. I'm going to go under on Roydale Williams. I think he's probably going to be pushing that 50, 60 yards. I think he's going to have a good day. I think he'll get at least a touchdown in there. Lawrence Toafili, I'll take the over on him, man. I think they're going to find ways to get him in space, and I think he's going to be dangerous in space, and I think he's going to make it happen.
Yeah, I actually am going to take the over on both of them. I really think Florida State really wants to run the ball. I think Mike Norvell is back for the vengeance when last year he couldn't run the ball predictably like he wants to. And I think you're going to see both of them I think both of them are going to go over 100 yards.
Hey, give me all of that, especially if DJ is going over 22.
Exactly.
Again, I could see that, though, because like I said, man, I do think Florida State's going to hit that 180 to 200 yard mark on the ground in this game. Now, let's get some quick keys, and then we're going to go to our score predictions, and we're going to wrap this show up. So, first off, for me, I think my keys to this game are going to be, one, you got to make Haynes King beat you with his arm. We've seen that he's been mistake prone. He's been inconsistent with his arm. He's really dangerous with his legs. You have a great secondary. I think you make not that his passing is a weakness, but I think he's probably more dangerous with his legs, right? So your secondary is your strength. I think you make his weakness go up against your strength and win the game in that manner. So I'm going to go with make Haynes King beat you through the air with his arm. The second thing I'm going to go with, my second key here, is going to be establish the run game and run down their throat until they prove they can stop it. And if they can't, let's just go triple option. If they do load the box, let's bust them over.
I love it. I love it. Yes. My keys to the game are very simple. Run the ball. Don't do anything else but run the ball, and then hit them over the top for the thing. And then I think on defense, my key to the game would be is to make Haynes, make him simple, make him one-dimensional, whatever it is. If it's throwing, make him throw the ball against your strength, as you said, Jesse. If he can't throw, then make him try to run a lot, and y'all just rough him up. That's my keys to the game.
I love it. And I would throw in there one that I think we both talked about on the other show is win the turnover battle, because you don't want to give that offense any extra at-bats if it does come down to a scoring contest. But, man, so let's get – I think that Florida State will – they've been good with turnovers. So hopefully, knock on wood, we do well with that. Now, let's get into this prediction, who's going to win and what our score is. I don't have the mascot head to put on or a helmet, or I don't have anything else to put on, so I wish I did, but – I did bring a prop, and I know yours wins because you have a great one there with you, but I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm taking Florida State in this one. Again, I think it's my thought on this is Florida State's offense is above average.
Yeah.
Florida State's defense is really good.
Yes.
Georgia Tech's offense is above average. Their defense is really bad. I like the coaching for Florida State. I think your strengths are stronger than their strengths, and I think their weaknesses are worse than your weaknesses. For that reason, I think Florida State goes overseas, gets their first international win, starts off 1-0 in ACC play, and I think they unload a can of Raid on the Yellow Jackets. Give me the Seminoles to take down the Yellow Jackets. Michael, I said the other day, 38-27. I'm not going to lie. I saw that picture of Mike Norvell getting off the plane. I'm feeling a little more confident. Let's go 34-20 Noles.
Okay, 34-20 Noles. Okay. Now, Georgia Tech is known as the Ramblin' Wreck, right? That's one of their like nicknames that they got. Well, I know that one of the greatest wreckers in all of sports history is none other than the toughest SOB in all of the of wrestling sports history, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And Stone Cold would say that he's gonna walk into the Aer Lingus Stadium and stump a mud hole in the Yellow Tech Jackets. Give me Florida State 31-17.
Let's go. Got the championship belt, bringing it home, baby. I love it. I was going to make a glass breaking noise too, but you had it covered. So that's going to do it for us guys on our first edition of the Plant the Spear Game Day. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully you'll tune into this and enjoy what we got for you guys here. As we know, College Game Day, they're probably going to be throwing some shade our way. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and we had a little bit of fun, a little bit of in-depth talk here. Make sure after the game is over that you come back and check us out Saturday after the game. We are going to be live, doing a live post-game reaction show. So make sure you guys hit that notification button so you don't miss that. Give us just a few minutes after the game to get some notes and thoughts together, and then we'll be jumping on with you guys. So be on the lookout for that. And as always, guys, it's time, Michael. It's time. I'm nervous. I'm excited. I'm everything in one, man. This is what we've been waiting for so long. It's time to get things going. Florida State, Georgia Tech, just a few hours away, man. Let's get it. It's 2024. It's time to start the redemption tour. Any final thoughts before we get out of here, man? Just excited to see this team get a chance to play. That's it, baby. Go Noles.